Hello and welcome to the new episode of the Game Informer Show. I'm your host, Ben Hansen, joined by Suriel Vasquez.
Hello.
Elise Bavis.
Hey.
And Joe Juba.
That's me.
I don't think this crew has ever assembled in this room for a podcast, so I'm very excited about it.
It's the first time we've all been in the same room.
It's true. Normally they hate each other with a fiery passion.
Rare company. Well, there's all the theories about us just being one person shifting identities.
That's like exactly what I was going to say, Joe. You read my mind.
Truly the same person after all. This is a hell of a show. There's some shows that everything just aligns for, and you realize like, oh, all these games I'm excited to talk about. I have pages and pages of notes, great community emails. Back half of the show, we have Mike Laidlaw, who recently left BioWare. He's the creative director for Dragon Age, and now he's in the consulting world. And so back half of the show, we have a fun interview. It starts out a little bit more dev focused, talking about him consulting, and then shifts and gets more and more into like the last couple of years at BioWare, which I consider very fascinating.
Yeah.
So he talks about like what it was like in the studio when Casey Hudson came back to now run the entire studio. He talks about the future of Dragon Age and how it might have shifted after he left. He talks about Anthem and kind of addresses some of the community's concern about that game and kind of a post-Battlefront cluster F world. Also, we just talk about RPGs in general. He's really a huge fan of Cyberpunk, and so we talk about CD Projekt Red. It's just great to have somebody, not that it's great that he's no longer working on Dragon Age, but it's awesome to have somebody as smart as him who knows so much about RPGs, leave EA, leave BioWare, and now it's like, game on, let's talk about everything.
One thing I remember about talking to Mike, and this is like on previous trips that we've done stories, and interviewed him, is that like there are some developers that when you talk to them about games, they're like, oh, hey, what are you playing lately? Or if you ask that, the answer is like, I've been trying to play some stuff, but like I've really been sort of head down on whatever game I'm
That's like
I'm
80% of developers, I think.
Yeah, a lot of people say, and that's not to say developers don't play games, but there are just times, especially when we are there visiting them, that they are maybe focused on their current game a little more, right?
Right.
But man, yeah, like Mike plays a lot of RPGs and other stuff. He knows his stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So, Joe, I hope you listen to the chat. I think it's educational.
Oh, I'm not going to. No.
Okay, great. Also, I didn't really want to bring it up because I know he's talked about it 6,000 times, like the Dragon Age 2 thing of like, what happened to that project?
Oh, yeah.
But he set it up for the most natural segue of all time. It's like, all right, let's go down this rabbit hole for a bit. Let's talk Dragon Age 2. But he handles it like a pro, like everything. So please listen to that. Look forward to it. Before we get to that, real quick update. Kingdom Come Deliverance, we talked a little bit about last week, and you said that Jeffem was reviewing it. Jeffem's still stuck in the Middle Ages. Really, head down. He's just hours and hours and hours into that thing.
This game is just huge.
It really is.
Yeah.
And he says it's fascinating still. His exact quote of where he's at is he says, it's immersive but challenging, and the bugs are becoming more and more of an issue as I go. So maybe next week we'll have him in for like his final conclusion on that.
Yeah, that was like my main concern, is that it seems like it could be such a buggy game.
Yeah.
But like it looks so cool and I want to play it, but like that was my big concern, is like they're striving for so much realism, and like how much is that actually going to work? And
well, there's bugs in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Very good point.
They're more localized though. It's like where the bugs are in this. Where this game, they can just come at you at any moment.
That's true. Especially though, considering that like you have teams like Bethesda whose job is just like who just have years of experience making these giant open worlds.
Yeah,
and even their games have a lot of bugs in them, and yet like you've got a less experienced team doing this hugely ambitious open world
for the first time.
Right, exactly. Like it's so ambitious, which is like makes me cautious,
Joe, as a huge open world RPG guy in general, have you been tempted? Have you picked up this game and looked at it longingly?
I have. I haven't actually bought it yet. I am still on the fence though, because there are just some of those. I love those games that like, even if there's like some wonkiness in the controls, I point to like Deadly Premonition as like one of my favorite games like this, even though it's not an RPG, where it's like at some point when you can sift through the sand and get to what's really good there, man, that can be good. And
but by sand you mean S, right? Just loads and loads of
in my mind,
sand, yeah.
In my mind, I'm thinking of like Aladdin and the diamond in the rough, but then there's that big like sand lion and stuff, and maybe it all got confused.
Well, he's kind of friendly. He has a cool voice for a little while, I guess, before it goes off the rails.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to trying it out at some point.
I'm looking forward.
Ideally, when it gets patched. That's what I want. Is some of those easy bugs. Sorry, keep going.
3 years from now. I was going to say, I was looking forward to this show for everything we're talking about. For games, we're talking about Metal Gear Survive out of the gate. I really want to talk about the Assassin's Creed Origins Discovery Tour thing, which we hinted at a little bit last week, but let's dive in. Leo is jonesing to talk about Rainbow Six Siege, which is going to be exciting. And then Elise, we want to talk about Florence, which is an iOS game. It's an interesting little thing. So before we get to any of that, though, there's a lot of setup we have to do for this podcast, apparently. I want to send out a reminder that something we talked about a couple weeks ago, the Game Informer 300th issue celebration is still happening on March 3rd.
It's not been canceled.
No, it has not been canceled. We've thought about it a couple times, but I think we're actually going to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's at Fulton Brewery, downtown Minneapolis. I'm sorry for the international listeners, or really non-Minnesota listeners.
Or non-Twin Cities, Minnesota listeners.
Or people in between who might be considering traveling out to Minnesota just for this and our terrible winter weather.
Yeah, we would love to see you. But
Totally worth it. Totally
don't
worth it.
stress out. But what we're going to do, it's that Saturday. So it's March 3rd. We're going to be sitting there all day drinking a lot of Fulton's 300 or non-alcoholic options, whatever you want. If you're under 21, you're more than welcome. Still wide open doors for you. But just a reminder, happening on the 3rd. You can find it on Facebook. Just search it out. So should be a good time. But for now, holy cow, we have not really talked about it. At least I haven't talked to Joe about it. I haven't really talked much to Surreal about it. Metal Gear Survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what a fascinating weird thing. Oh my God. Joe, I'm such a geek. I went back to this podcast feed, like back in the days when we first started talking about Phantom Pain and Ground Zeroes, and it's like you and I and Dan Reichert and Tim Turry.
Oh, wow.
And it's so much fun to listen to those conversations and just think about the long journey that essentially this game has had. And now we're at a point talking about Metal Gear Survive in 2018. And I feel like out of the gate, because there's definitely that crowd out there that says F this game.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with it. Which camera are we on, Leo? I need to have a message for these people.
Okay.
I get it. Joe, you can join me whenever you want.
Okay.
We understand that
Mhm.
Kojima isn't involved with this game. I understand for some people that means F this, F the game. I want nothing to do with it. And that's fine. You can do whatever you want. But we need to cover games. We're not apologists. We're not kissing up to Konami's ass. We're analysts. We want to talk about a game that is on the shelves that's fascinating. We're not spitting on Kojima's grave.
And if it makes you feel any better, I will not have very nice things to say about it.
All right, so Surreal, you're reviewing this thing.
Yeah. I mean, just to start off, like, F this game. It's a mess.
As reviews editor, I also want to point out, Suri is still in the process of reviewing this
Sure.
game, so opinions are not final.
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
I've been playing. I played it since it came out, basically, since they didn't give us any access to the game pre-launch. So I've been playing it with random people and just mostly single player. Because the weird thing, they sold it strangely on several counts. So I think early on they showed it off with nothing but co-op, and then only now, I think 1 or 2 months ago, they started sort of showing you, here's the single player.
I think they said, like, there's going to be a single player mode.
Yeah.
But you never know
Yeah.
if that's like a Titanfall situation or what.
Yeah, so it always felt like a throwaway part of the game, but having played it, for about a day, that feels like that is the main crux of the game.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's so weird, the disconnect between how this game was presented as this big, like, hey, it's a co-op survival experience,
Right.
versus the reality of the game, which is like, if you want to do co-op survival stuff, you can, like, I guess that's a separate mode you can go do, but like the game really presents itself as this like single player survival
To the point
Yeah.
that you had to look up, like, online, like, how do I even play co-op?
Yeah.
Like, where is this
Yeah.
buried? It's like, okay, it's in the menu on
You
the
have to
home
go talk
base.
to this robot thing, and he'll take
That
you
is-
to purgatory.
That is so weird.
I know,
because like I played a preview version of Metal Gear Survive like a year ago or something. I think at Gamescom, and that they were just like, here's some like co-op mode to play, and that they didn't like. It was like briefly mentioned that there would probably be a single player thing that they were still working on that would like come to the game,
It's
and they're
huge.
just like, and they were just like, no, like this is the co-op. Blah, blah, blah. Like it was so focused on
But-
that section.
And that's the other thing that's funny about it, is that like it is, so they spend so much time presenting it as co-op, and then you have to play the game for probably a good 2 to 3 hours before like the meat of the co-op stuff is even like available to you.
yeah.
Yeah,
And-
before the tutorials end. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, is like there's so much speculation and emotions for this game, and even starting it out, it was a real roller coaster ride of emotions for me. And then where I got to, I'm only like a couple hours in, maybe like 4 or 5 hours. I just realized like, okay, this is just a quirky Japanese survival game.
Yeah.
Like that is how I need to reframe all this. After wild speculation about what this thing could be, it's like, oh, it's just a survival game. Okay, it's not the end of the world, everybody.
But the other thing is like it's not a great survival game. Or it's like I feel like some of the balance is, and I don't want to like taint Suriel's view on
He's
this
not listening. It's
necessarily,
okay.
but feel free to disagree with me on this front, Suriel. But it's like I think what bothers me about it the most is the fact that there's a loop that I can see that would be entertaining, right?
Yes.
About like going out and gathering materials and scavenging and killing stuff. And like, I like base building and stuff in games. That could be so fun. And it is so hard to engage with that just because of how like oppressive the hunger and thirst mechanics are in this.
It is like managing the world's worst phone battery. It is so it is just constantly ticking down, and I get part of it is that the game's day cycles are accelerated, right? So it's like whatever 15 45 days or 4 minutes for a day.
Okay.
So I guess if you eat 3 times a day, that sort of makes sense. But
come on, games, you don't got to do that.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's fun or interesting, because I feel like despite sort of the situation, which is you are someone from the, Big Boss's company, Militaire Sans Frontiers, which by the way I named myself Bigger Boss.
I named myself Little Boss.
I named myself Snack instead of Snake.
Okay, Joe, you lose.
A solid snack.
Which is what you'll need frequently in this game.
Exactly. So you as the main character are sucked into this wormhole into another land called Dite, which is seems to resemble Pakistan around the time that Metal Gear Solid 5.
Needn't say more. We understand the premise. You're sucked into a wormhole in an alternate version of Earth in the Metal Gear universe called Dite. We get it.
It's in the wiki, guys. Read up. So you get transplanted, and the whole idea is you're here to find the crew that has been sort of abandoned here, and also find this very important information. But the idea is like, I don't know if I'm gonna get out alive. But my main concern has not been like, am I going to survive? It's more like, I need to find some freaking sheep to kill. Like it is the most mundane thing that you could be worried about. And yet like there are these areas where you go in and you need a gas mask. And so those tick down your oxygen meter, and that is another resource to manage. And you would think that to me seems like a mechanic more worthy of attention, of just, I don't know if I'm going to have the oxygen to survive. Like that seems like an interesting mechanic to have to manage. Whereas I don't like the idea of I constantly need to be worrying about where's my next meal going to come from, which I think is a crux of survival games. But here it just feels like that is literally the only thing that I am worried about constantly.
It's so fascinating to see this game and be like, oh, there are some ideas here which I thought were going to be implemented more into Snake Eater. And it's so bizarre to be like, oh, you're actually having to survive out in the wilderness, and we put it front and center in this game. Like there are meters hovering over your character as you're running around,
like oxygen, thirst, hunger, and then like there's basically your Wi-Fi signal when you go into the dust areas, because they don't. Yeah, you have a mini map. I don't know if you actually have a mini map, but you have like information on screen, and when you go into those areas, it basically obscures your objective marker, so you can't see anything, which is kind of cool, because then you have to sort of read lights and sort of like, okay, if
it kind of does, but then when you get close to something, then the objective pops up again. It's
so
like,
it's a weird thing, but like I think conceptually, I like the idea of having to guide yourself by the nearest light that's nearby. But they don't necessarily execute on that. But that's an interesting thing, right? Whereas the idea of like, well, I forgot to kill a sheep or something, or I didn't pick up gerbils that were running along the ground, so now I'm completely screwed. Like that doesn't seem like an interesting part of the game to have to manage as much as you do. Like there's a certain amount of it where it's like, that'd be fine if every once in a while I had to go out and kill a sheep or something, just for terms of pacing. But the idea that you have to do it almost constantly, you do basically one excursion and you basically have to go out and scrounge
just
for like
desperately
an hour.
sprinting around looking for a sheep to punch.
Because that's been my main hunting method, is just instead of sneaking up and like stabbing them, I'll just run full force and just clock them.
The bionic arm, basically.
Does it at least like get a little easier as you progress?
I've gotten to the point where I've sort of crossed the line between like I am just living off my next single resource to now I have a potato farm, I have a corn farm set up in my
potato farming in Metal Gear,
and I have like
potato farm.
I have like the level 3 sort of cooking arrangement thing station where you can smoke meat and have that enhance the amount of hunger that heals, but it still feels like it's still in the back of my head of just, okay, at some point I'm going to have to stop what I'm doing and go do this other thing. And that's the other thing that it feels sort of bisected, because in something like Don't Starve, the whole survival aspect is kind of the whole deal.
Yeah.
Whereas here is you have the single player campaign that is stopgapped by the survival aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
So something bizarre that you found out, or seems to be part of your strategy at this point, is going into co-op missions will replenish your food and water meters?
It's inconsistent so far. So like the first time I did it,
Good.
I was super low on resources, and when I finished the mission, I was just completely healed up 100%. So I was like, oh, I guess maybe this is just a way to heal up, but it doesn't seem consistent. I think Joe has found out like a more consistent thing is if you're below 25% on hunger and thirst, if you just go into that white space purgatory and then come back out, you'll be healed up to 25%.
And like your ceiling is bumped up to 25%, but your meters also still
so
heal up beyond that.
What hunger and thirst
anyway.
do is they basically cap your max health, but if you already have, over that amount, it won't sort of deplete. It'll just, once you deplete it, it won't replenish. So if you're under that cap, it'll heal slowly. But
anyway, having to find those
Yeah.
workarounds though is like super annoying.
It's just
It's
not
bizarre.
yeah.
So what about like the overall progression? Because I'm kind of in the same camp as Joe, where I like a lot of this stuff in theory, and I'm just wondering if it's going to fall into a groove of progression that's going to feel satisfying for like building out my base, understanding the dynamics. Have you gotten to a point where you feel like you understand the loop pretty well?
I think there are still parts of it where I feel like I'm right now it keeps telling me that I'm bleeding medical resources and I'm not sure what to do about it. Because right now I have workers in my base. I have like 1 or 2 workers in my base.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
And you sort of do the Metal Gear Solid 5 of like, okay, you're assigning people to teams.
Oh.
And so like, here's the medical team here. But I basically only
Joe,
have like,
you're into this. You're
I
into
am,
it.
Of course I am, but I've played this game for probably 5 or 6 hours now, maybe.
Yeah, and it's-
and I'm not anywhere close to that. So
Yeah.
like,
yeah, it seems like it wants to be every kind of game at the same time of just like, here's a single player, like slightly narrative
Sounds very
experience.
disorienting.
Here's a sim
Yeah.
kind of game. Here's this online co-op thing, but it doesn't never. It so far it hasn't seemed to manage those, like the interplay between those aspects super well. But yeah, I am at a point where it's like I'm concerned about food, but I'm not super in dire need. And so as you expand the map, you get more and more areas where it's like, okay, this is going to be a more like a not regular, but a food source that I can sort of check in every once in a while, and there'll be sheep to punch or whatever.
Thank God.
and not that I imagine that there are a ton of defenders out there for this, but I mean, to be clear, it isn't the fact that this game has hunger and thirst meters that's the
Right,
problem.
right,
I mean, like that's a staple of this kind of game. It's just their implementation is just particularly restrictive.
Right.
But I mean, on the flip side, we are in the early hours of the game.
Yeah,
And like if it
we-
keeps going
we
the
are.
direction Serial's going, that's kind of cool.
But then it's a pacing problem that you should not make people have to play as long as it seems like you have to play before you feel like some of that pressure is
Yeah.
being lifted.
Right.
The other
Yeah.
thing is that
Issue.
I mentioned this to Joe earlier, but it feels like in a lot of survival games, eventually you find, or games like this tough, right? You find ways to sort of circumvent some of the earlier problems in the game. So like as you progress, you feel like, oh, I have to do this, but I have a bigger oxygen tank or something. I have ways to get food, or I have pouches that'll like feed me or something. But here it just feels like I am still at the point where I have to make regular stops to refuel. I just happen to have more resources. There's no like, you have an expanded stomach or whatever they would justify having to say
Nanomachines.
or like, I've introduced fiber into my diet, or whatever they would do to stave off hunger for longer.
Right.
And like, I haven't upgraded my oxygen tank, so it's not like I can delve further into the expanses,
Yeah.
into the dust. I just have more points in which I can warp. So it never feels like you are getting more powerful. It just feels like you have more stuff.
What about the actual co-op missions? If people are like, maybe they got into the multiplayer of Metal Gear Solid 5, I don't know who those people are, but they're probably out there, and
Yeah.
they want more like co-op focused with Metal Gear
Yeah.
Solid mechanics. Like, is that interesting?
I think that a lot of people were sort of, I mean, just the premise of this game, I think, is offensive to a lot of people for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But I think when they introduced it as here's this co-op experience, I was actually like, I had zero expectations in terms of this is going to be in any way a Metal Gear game. So I think a lot of people are reading it like they seem to just now be coming coming around to the conclusion that's, oh, this isn't a Metal Gear game at all. But I feel like that's where I started, of just like, I have zero expectations of this being a Metal Gear game.
Yeah.
So just the idea of like, I get to play around with Metal Gear Solid 5's gameplay in a co-op setting with, wave-based survival, that actually sounds kind of cool. So far, I've only played 2 co-op missions, and it feels like until this morning, I'd only played 1.
You're not talking about one round. It's just there's like a set thing, like
There's
this arena,
one-
this space,
right.
this scenario.
So the first mission is just you go into this. You start off in one area and you go and scrounge for resources for about a minute and a half or something, and then you set up camp to build defenses and stuff against 3 waves of zombies.
Fortniting around, yeah.
Right, basically. But like there are just issues there where Joe Reeves and I tried to hop into a match and all the enemies were level 20. So the only way we could really feasibly kill them was to like sneak up behind them and stab them in the back. Whereas now I'm level 20, and so I'm building up defenses and just shooting them with my bow through fences and stuff. So now it seems more manageable. But the idea that the level at which you unlock them seems completely out of sync with when you should actually start playing co-op.
They want you to play single player for a hell of a long time.
Yeah. Before, even though you can technically access the co-op, 2 hours in or whatever, you don't actually want to play it until you're like level 12 or 15. Because the only time I ever did well was when I was being carried by people who were way stronger than me early on. And it just seems like it feels like they should have had at least one mission early on that's like, here's a sample co-op mission for people so you can you can want to do this. But it doesn't seem like it's there either.
I tried playing with you last night, and you had to revive me so frequently, and then I just kept yelling "rock and roll," which is a cool little voice chat you can just spam, which is very funny as I'm going down again and again.
There is that co-op fun of just like, okay, I know this wave is going to be over, because like when the wave is over, even if there are zombies, the digger thing you're trying to defend will explode.
The hell digger explodes. We get it, Zuriel.
And so knowing that you're going to win the round, I'll just salute for like the last 5 seconds of the round, and then everything will just explode around me. So it's like,
it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that part is fun. But to be fair, Hanson, we did get an S rank on that mission. We did it well
If
on
that's
that
an
mission.
S rank, I don't know how this game works.
That actually brings up a good point. So you got an S rank. What fantastic rewards did you get?
Resources. A bunch of resources.
So there's not even that element of like oh, here's like a cool gun or something like that.
Because it's like, so basically all you get is just more random drops, more resources, because the way they gate you is that as you progress through the single player campaign, you unlock more things, and you can also find them out in the field of just, here's a recipe for a shotgun or whatever. So that is the thing that you unlock. But if you want to, okay, here's a really hard mission, I'm going to play it. Like, it's not going to be, I'm doing this for this specific reward. I'm doing it just to amass more resources to take back into my single player. So even when we did really well, I'm just like, all right, well, I guess I have more screws and aluminum. That's cool.
But Zuriel, you got those materials from cardboard boxes falling out of the sky, and you open them up, which is pretty sweet.
That's true. It's also really weird because I showed Hanson this, but at the beginning of that mission, there's a chest to your immediate left, and I told Hanson that basically if you open this chest, you're screwed, because someone is going as you're playing the lock picking mini game to open it. As soon as you open it, if there's a person right next to you, they can grab those supplies before you can.
You go through all the effort to unlock this, and someone else is like zoinks,
right?
Because you're stuck in this interface,
right? So I it's hard to know how the co-op works exactly, but I think those go into a shared pool. But you get points for amassing, for collecting things, and at the end, the person with the highest score gets more stuff.
Yeah.
So you basically lose out on those points that could have gotten you the win by investing in the lock picking mini game. So it just seems like it is at times sort of weirdly conflicting in terms of how individualistic it wants to be versus how cooperative it wants to be. So it just feels kind of like a mess that I'm not sure what the direction here is.
Well, speaking of direction, I mean, we could talk a little bit about Kojima not being involved with this game. He's only had one quote, I think, on the record about it, where he said it needs mechs in it. Which I was like, okay, cool feedback, dude.
It does have the walkers.
Yeah, I found a walker.
It does,
here,
and there was a trailer. I won't spoil it because it felt like a spoilery trailer. But there was one trailer where they showed something super duper Metal Gear, which doesn't work in this timeline at all. And I'm very curious how they explain its existence back in this time frame.
It's about a super dimensional travel or whatever.
Oh, okay. talk about the coward's way out. Did you guys see this in the beginning? This opening cutscene, which is surprisingly long, surprisingly beefy. It sets it up and says it's a pseudo-historical story.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Just pick a lane. As a Metal Gear fan, I don't know how to take this.
Metal
now.
Gear is a pseudo-historical story.
Well, at least they don't ever set up a Metal Gear game saying, like, maybe this happened, you tell us. Like, no, I want to know if this is canon or not. And I love, if I could have any footage in the world right now, forget dinosaurs, forget anything. I just want footage of the meeting that probably happened in Kojima Productions, where at some point in Phantom Pain's development, someone asked Kojima, could we have, like, I don't know, wormhole guns for the Fulton? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then just that one item in Phantom Pain now being blown out into the most batshit scenario.
Or maybe they were
imaginable.
just trying to subvert him from there. It's like, can we have a wormhole thing? It's like, yeah, sure. We got it. All right, let's go make this whole game.
So let me tell you that, like, as a huge fan of this series,
Yeah.
I was super turned off by the beginning of this game.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
was intrigued, but go on.
Because it's like Metal Gear always has some does go in some kooky directions sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Acknowledged. But the way that I feel like historically the game sort of builds a foundation before it goes in those weird places. Or like it spends time building atmosphere and tone in a way that when something like Psycho Mantis shows up, you're kind of like, huh, okay.
Yeah.
And like this game is just takes the most artless approach to introducing all of this like stupid crap that's happening. It dumps everything on you immediately.
Well, it opens
And
with...
just, I guess, for me, it's ultimately just like the way this game is bending over backwards, trying to be like, look, we're part of the Metal Gear universe, everyone. No, this is Metal Gear.
This is pseudo-historically accurate to Metal Gear.
Yeah, it's like, no, it's Metal Gear Survive. This is part of the Metal Gear universe. It's just like, it just feels like so divorced from like what anyone wants from Metal Gear.
It was a messy divorce. There is funny like metaphors you can read into if you want to be a nerd about this stuff. Like there's a discussion early on when they're explaining Dite and the existence of this hell dimension. They call it hell so many times.
Yeah.
But they're talking about it, and there's two characters kind of arguing about its existence. And the argument is like, there's no basis for that in reality. And then literally the other character is like, there is a basis. This is scientifically accurate. It makes sense. Like, please accept this, Metal Gear fans.
Yeah. And I guess that's what I mean is that like it feels very weird to me the way the game like is trying to justify itself to an audience that just doesn't care or want it to.
Yeah,
you know?
Really? I feel like
Yeah.
there's two separate audiences, right? Like one that it does not care about Metal Gear at all, and they just want a fun, game to play, whether it's survival or whether they went into it with the expectations of co-op. And then there's like Metal Gear fans. I think them sort of posturing in terms of like this is a big important part of Metal Gear history.
I don't think they are though.
But I feel like the length and meatiness of that opening cutscene makes you think about like this is going to be a game that it ends up not being, of just like here's a
That's
very
true.
heavily cinematic game that is going to have story, but then like
Big Boss is in it, for Christ's sake.
right for one
Getting on a helicopter.
Yeah,
and
Stop
leaving.
saying that.
for 1
He
second.
is. He
No,
is.
I know, but I mean,
Uh,
I don't think the intro positions itself as saying this is like an important Metal Gear game. It just tries really hard to like
Establish its connection.
exactly,
Right.
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Which is helpful to know
Right.
the timeline and stuff like that. And if you
Yeah.
want to be a metaphorical nerd again, like the scene opens with Big Boss leaving, and then the soldiers left behind, Kojima Productions, saying, "Boss, don't go! All right, now we're stranded. We have to make of this what we can." It's an
Sounds like
interesting...
they're just trying way too hard.
And for the
Yeah.
people, the people who just
get
want
it.
like a co-op game, all of this setup just feels like I'm just gonna button through this because none of it. It's not like in and of itself, like aside from the Metal Gear universe or narrative, it doesn't seem like it's interesting enough on its own.
I don't know. I think Reeve is a pretty fascinating character.
Oh, Ben
And
Reeve.
There's also a part of me, and this is divorced from like the game proper, but like I am just so mad that this game exists, but we do not have like the game that Metal Gear Solid 5 like almost was. You know,
What do you mean?
we get Metal Gear Survive instead of Metal Gear 5 Special Edition that has like that final mission that they teased in that featurette, and like that has that giant tank that you spend the whole game assembling and then ultimately just barely does anything.
But would you want that without
It was-
Kojima there?
Yeah.
Really? You'd want them to tell that focus
I
on
mean,
the
it's
story?
not like it's gonna make people any less angry
What?
than a game called Metal Gear Survive. Basically,
I think it would. I feel like on the
See, for
in the
me-
realm of territory, this is like a 2 out of 10 on how offensive a new Metal Gear game could be. It's so weird and detached. It feels like Revengeance to me. It's like whatever.
Yeah, I guess my argument here is that like Metal Gear Solid 5 is still directed by Kojima, right? For the most part, I don't think if you implement a scene that they already designed and storyboarded and just like make that scene into a game, like I don't think that that's some huge affront.
It's like a Ground Zeroes type scope, even just of that crazy island thing.
I'm just saying a special like re-release Metal Gear Solid 5, give it some enhancements, right? Like add that final mission, add, like I said, that tank that was initially intended to be like like something you could take out into the field and then got scaled back.
Yeah.
Put that in there. And even, hey, if you want to use some parts of Survive, if you want to put in like it sounds like the base building stuff is kind of cool. Like, hey, expand, make a little base building mode.
Co-op missions, they already basically have zombies in Phantom Pain anyway. Just like use those instead of the glowing head guys.
So yeah, like the fact that, like, to me, I don't understand why you go to all this, like why Konami goes to all this trouble to make this like weird survival game when it can sort of ride the coattails of this already successful project that they can just sort of augment. And I mean, I'd buy it again, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, but Joe, what if the inclusion of D-Tay? What if it means, because maybe it is hell, and maybe every Metal Gear boss ever has been sent to D-Tay, and that's how the game ends, is you fight every boss ever, because that is hell in this world. Like a Dragon Ball type
I already
existence.
fought those bosses.
Yeah, but don't you want to fight him in hell? I mean, D-Tay, sorry.
Yeah,
I feel like reaching the end of that game is going to be D-Tay.
I don't know.
I think I'm digging parts of it, and I'm with Joe, and I'm waiting for it to click, and I hope it does, because there's parts of me where it's like, I think I can get into this. I think I'm kind of enjoying my time.
Yeah, I'm sort of there as well. Just like there are parts where you know I'll go into the dust and come back and like, oh, that was really like I was over encumbered but I made it past all these zombies and I just brought a crap ton of supplies to my guys and I was like, I enjoyed the tension there, but it just seems like, all right, now time for half an hour of menus and trying to cook stuff so I can keep playing this game.
Right.
So it feels like it is a game that is like, regardless of whatever the context of Metal Gears or its structures, it just feels like it is still getting in its own way, in a lot of in key ways, I think.
Yeah.
I can echo that there are some like exceptional moments like that in there too. Like the first time I went into the dust. Even though it's like you take 3 steps in there and your new objective is supposed to pop up, I like took a sharp wrong turn right away. Basically, the first time I went to the dust, I got super lost and turned around and was like, had just like slivers of health left. My oxygen was depleting, and I managed to find this little like pocket of safety that like wasn't in the dust.
Yeah.
And then I could open up my map and see where I was, and I was just like super off track. But the sensation of like actually coming back from that outing alive, having all this extra stuff and feeling like you had a narrow scrape with death.
I got away with it.
Yeah. That's fun on the like rare occasions that everything aligns and like makes that happen.
I will say that narratively there is at least one thread that I'm interested in seeing how it plays out. But other than that, it just feels like every plot point has been, all right, well, now we have this person working here and they're in charge of expeditions. Here's a 5-minute thing on how expeditions will work. Go find us someone who can know expeditions, I guess. And it just seems like it just feels like half of this game is filler. Like,
don't you want to know who Good Luck really is and who he's working for?
I'm interested in seeing more of his. Like the one time you see his model, I think like I was kind of impressed by how his hair looked. I thought that was like, that's kind of impressive.
Good
hair.
luck, good hair. Hell. I'm also hoping they pay off and explain in any more context why there were the Wanderer zombies in Vietnam. Like
they were also part of the Philadelphia experiment at some point.
What the hell's going
sounds
on?
ridiculous.
I mean, no,
you should play it at least.
You would absolutely
I'm
love
really
it.
sold.
Only marginally more ridiculous than other stuff that's been like retcon into Metal Gear's history. But yeah, it does feel crazy.
It turns out there's still a lot of talent that worked on this game. Like it turned out that the absurd Wanderer designs, that's from the old art director for the Silent Hill series. So he was like the creature designer for like Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3, and The Room as well.
Yeah,
I think
that makes a little bit.
It's crazy, and even like the director of this game, like he's been a writer on Metal Gear since Metal Gear Solid 3, apparently. So there is like a cool core team. Like if this team separated and just formed a new indie studio, we'd be excited about that talent and what they were making. So I hate throwing all
I
these
feel like
developers
this
under
really
the bus.
just shouldn't have been a Metal Gear game.
Yeah.
Is the
It-
vibe I'm
But the
getting.
sound effects are good, Elise.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is. Yeah,
they play the Peace Walker theme in the beginning. It's badass.
It's
Oh,
also
boy.
they have a surprisingly unsettling throwing up sound effect for when you get sick.
and a farty sound effect as well.
Once
I'm,
again, so sold.
I am super curious to see how this game ends, just because I have no idea like what sort of how this game says. All right, it's over. Like like you are. Do you go back to the? Do
You
go-
can't.
Yeah,
You
do-
can't,
Do
right?
you return to Mother Base at some point? It's like, all right, I finished it, or is it just it's like, all right, your base is done. Keep doing the loop.
No, you have to open the wormhole to get back to your home
Right, that's
dimension.
what I'm saying. Like at the end, is that the last mission of just like, all right, we're back in our own world.
But-
We did it.
One of
Yep,
the-
there it is.
One of the weird things, though, is like right when you start up this game, I don't think I've seen this in a game before. It gives you a roadmap of content releases, like coming up in March, coming up
Yeah.
throughout the summer.
Mhm.
So in theory, they're going to want to keep you in that world, so
Yeah,
you keep
but it's
trickling
like,
out this
all
stuff.
right, in March we're adding another co-op mission, which
Yeah.
is good because right now there's only 2 that I've seen. But
Yeah.
they also have this weird thing where it's like if you buy the microtransaction currency in Japan, there's like this weird limit where it's like you have to spend, you have like 180 days to spend it.
What?
Otherwise, it goes away. Like I there's like
Like
this weird like
rental
disclaimer of
currency?
like in Japan, it might be tied to some law or something where it's like if you buy this currency, it is limited in some way. Like which is a weird disclaimer to have it up front in your game, but
Let's go with Cuban energy instead.
Kuban and yeah.
Holy cow. Metal Gear Survive. What a ride, man. I think I'm going to
Okay.
keep playing it.
Yeah,
I'm into it.
I mean, I have to for work, but I think
I love that.
I think I am enjoying it, but I'm way more fascinated by it
Yes.
and compelled to see it
Yes,
just to
yes,
see what
yes.
it is more than like, all right, this is going to be a good time. I'm going to keep going because I'm having fun.
I'm totally with you, Serial. On the complete opposite side of the world, speaking of remixing assets into something new, Assassin's Creed Origins Discovery Tour. Elise, you seemed interested in this, right?
Yeah, I am.
So
yeah.
we have a new gameplay today video up. If you want to check it out, if you're watching the video version of this, it should be picture in picture right now. But what it is they took the world of Assassin's Creed Origins, stripped out all the gameplay, all those mechanics, get it the hell out of there, and now it's just basically educational Breath of the Wild. Just
Wait,
go wherever
wait.
you want, learn whatever you
A
want.
pseudo historical experience.
So they don't have any like there's not levels or enemies or
No.
anything.
No, that's all stripped out.
or
Like, that's
equipment.
all-
It's just like
Yeah.
you Bayek and a horse.
There is a torch that you can use, which I found out the hard way because I ran into the pyramid and then was just in pitch black. Like, what the hell, historical
So,
tour?
Are you still playing as like Bayek and you're
You can, but the crazy part is you can choose what avatar you want, and they have like, I don't know, maybe 24 different models in the game, which is really interesting. So you can be modern day people going back there. You can be little kids. You can be
I like
Bayek's
the idea of a
wife.
modern day guy. Like, oh, pyramids, huh?
Cool. Mommy's gross.
Can you play as one of the humans from Super Mario Odyssey?
Yep, you can. That's in there for absolutely no
Perfect.
reason whatsoever.
Mhm.
But it's really fascinating. And so they have dozens and dozens of these like tours, and you can jump anywhere you want, fast travel, or you can just wander around and look for the little markers and then just sit back, and they have like professional VO on this little guided path, and you can listen to it. You can look at just old artwork, pieces of like reference that they have that they license from museums all around the world. It's a really, really cool edition. It's just fun. Like I think the sweet spot is I played an hour of Assassin's Creed Origins and then stopped because I suck.
Mhm.
I understand it's a good game, so people
Yeah,
love it
yeah.
a lot. But I love just seeing the world in this way where I am just blown away at every turn, wandering around that world of like the detail of this place is absurd. This is so much great work from Ubisoft.
So is this like a paid DLC that you download, or is
No.
this just free?
It's free if you own the game, and you can buy
Okay.
it separately for $20, which I've been keeping an eye on that store on Steam, and not many user reviews flowing in, but I hope people find it, because even if you haven't played the game, I think it's just an awesome, bizarre experience to see this incredible work.
It seems like one of those things where I think I would enjoy it if I sat down and played it, but I'm curious as to when I'll be in the. You know what I'm in the mood for? I want to explore Egypt without the constraints of a video game, which I actually think is kind of cool because like
Yeah,
when you
cool.
think about even like modern games. Like almost one of the most consistently good parts about open world games is like the world is incredible. Like the thing that they have built here is stunning in like in a lot of open world games.
and then you'd like, oh well, actually doing game stuff is hit or miss depending on the game.
Right.
So the idea of just like you just get to take in the world without having to put up with any of the game parts, I think is actually like a smart way to leverage sort of how much work went into building it.
For sure. Yeah, nothing can go wrong when you're just wandering around a world.
Yeah,
No,
I don't know.
annoying
I
fetch
think I could
quests.
see myself getting into that. I mean,
Yeah.
like probably not like consistently for like a long time, but I think like there'd probably be a day where I'm just like, yeah, I feel kind of lazy and I just want to like explore ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
And like that sounds kind of cool.
I'm in the mood to read a book, but not really.
I want to run around and
that is a
bug
sentiment I
NPCs
feel
while I
often.
do
I
it.
wish these books had less words in them and more pictures, man. I'm ready for this video game.
It is smart because I'm sure Ubisoft just like invest a ton of resources into that research for their worlds
Yeah.
anyway, so to sort of like have a way to surface that.
And they have a really nice message at the beginning, which I appreciate, where it's just like just a text on the screen saying like, hey, we spent 4 years making this game. With this educational mode, we're trying to imbue some of the passion that we have for this world to our audience. So we want to help you better understand what's great about it.
Mhm.
And you just wander around and learn how many brothers Cleopatra was banging. It's like, it's good stuff. There's fun stuff in there.
How many?
2, turns out.
Oh, okay.
How
Two
about
hot
twins?
brothers.
How about crocodiles?
I didn't see anything in crocodiles. There's good mummy stuff. There's this one effed up part where you're walking through kind of like
Okay.
the artist area, and there's just this guy like I was gonna say going to town on a corpse, but that could be disgusting. You're just like really just like dissecting a corpse and stuff. And it turns out it's like this historical figure who Alexandria, I guess, is famous for being science capital of the world and a super smart place where, hey, be scientific. We're not going to bug you. So this effing guy, hang on, I wrote it down, is in 320 BC. He performed 600 vivisections on prisoners to find out how the body worked. Just
Oh.
tore them apart while they were alive. 600 people.
Oh wow.
Isn't that wild?
Oh,
So you
my.
can bug him if you want. You can run around.
No, I
in
really
circles
want to
around
explore
him.
this world.
So how
Sounds
does the
so
body
inviting.
Hey
Go
man,
down-
But
can we vivisect something like right now?
I love
on, man.
I love vivisecting.
Let's go to that crocodile. He's right over here.
I think what I'm really curious about with this whole like discovery tour thing is how much it could be used in classrooms and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that is so cool. Imagine if you're like a 5th grader and you're going to school and your teacher is like, "Hey, today we're going to just play some Assassin's Creed all day and learn about ancient Egypt." Like how awesome would that be?
Or better yet, you're learning about ancient Egypt, and then you have like a show and tell. You bring in your cool Xbox One X and set it up, and just like let's actually walk around the Great Pyramid
Right.
and see
Like-
how effing big this thing is.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mike Lynch actually wrote in just to jump the gun on emails, saying that he really wanted more games to take this approach, and he was
Mhm.
asking what games we'd want. I mean, I think every Assassin's Creed you should do this
For
with.
sure.
Go
Yeah.
back, patch it in. I would love especially Assassin's Creed 3. That was a world that I really loved, but the gameplay
Or-
obviously was problematic.
Or maybe like any game that has like really extensive lore, like even like an open world RPG, like The Witcher 3 or something, like just like going
Yeah.
through the world and learning more.
Totally.
About...
I feel like a lot of those
That would be
games like have codexes though, right? Like kind of do that, right? Databases and things like that.
But not
But
like
maybe
a cool,
if it's more like immersive
Yeah.
than just like going around reading blocks of text.
that
Yeah.
encourages you
Like
to like
things-
walk around and look at the world
Yeah.
itself.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Like Mass Effect.
Yeah, sure. Change all of
Mass
Andromeda
Effect.
just into one giant discovery tour. Mike Lynch really wanted Bloodborne, which is another crazy
Oh,
impressive
yeah.
world. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
But it's something bizarre to think about the future of Assassin's Creed. I don't know if you have a lot of thoughts on this, Joe, but apparently Guillemot, the Ubisoft CEO, he was talking about the future of Assassin's Creed, and he said there are like 2 DLC packs. One's already out for
Mhm.
Assassin's Creed Origins. Miller has impressions on the site if you want to search that out. Do you remember what it's called, Joe?
The hidden ones.
The Hidden Ones. There we go. Hopefully it's not hidden in SEO.
Mm-hmm.
But Guillemot said, you'll be amazed. Outside the DLC packs, he says, you'll be amazed by what will come. Hang on, let me try this again. You'll be amazed by what will come on Assassin's Creed Origins. So that's the only thing we can say now. But there's going to be something wild that's different from the DLC.
I'm sure. I mean, my guess is that just means Assassin's Creed Origins as a platform in the same way that like Assassin's Creed 2 was a platform.
Oh, you mean like just taking that setting for a new game?
Yeah, or maybe not even that setting, just like the engine and the technology for it. Like basically an Assassin's Creed Origins 2 and or 3 following Bayek or other like figures in that world.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask, because having not played that much of Origins, like, do you ever play as other characters? Because it's crazy that they set up this, animation rig so that you can switch between all these different people. Like those kids in the Discovery Tour can climb. You can be so many different types of people.
You do have, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but like Bayek is not the only character you control in that game.
Okay, so in theory, it's baked in. It's not like it's hinting towards maybe some multiplayer or some more character swapping in the future.
I mean,
this.
one thing about that game that always sort of threw me for a loop a little bit is that like why they didn't just make like why they didn't let players choose to be either Bayek or Aya in the same way that like you could choose Evie or Jacob in Syndicate. Because like they're both. I mean, granted, during the course of the story, the narrative has them off doing different things at times, but like ultimately they're both trying to
almost
do.
always together
They're constantly intertwined,
and
yeah.
like yeah.
They're even if they're not together, their goals are always intertwined to the point that it's like it would make total sense if either Bayek or Aya assassinated this person. You know,
Right.
That would have
right.
been real
So-
cool.
Anyway,
Yeah. Another cool thing, real quick, is they really promote you a lot, including like when you're not learning anything. Still, the narrator in the Discovery Tour will be like, "Remember, you can use your photo mode whenever you want. Share these online." And if you look at the map, I don't know how it's instancing it or whatever, but you can see other people's photos like built into the world map like that.
they do that. That's actually really aggravating to me in Origins.
Oh, they do that in the main game as well.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep, but like that bothers me. I don't like all these extra icons just showing me
Yeah.
like a bunch of dumb pictures people took.
Well, in the Discovery Tour, it's funny. Just I don't know, funny, but people are really going to town on like the crucifixion alley. Like everyone's just taking like wacky selfies next to a bunch of crucifixes. Just like little kids, like yeah, check it out.
Of course they are.
Wow.
It's a
Okay.
good time.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hey, speaking of wonderful worlds and detail-rich environments, Leo Vader from Ubisoft, they had a free weekend for Rainbow Six Siege recently to go along with the Invitational, like the big tournament that happened.
Wasn't that was a 2016 game, right?
I think 2015.
Okay.
Actually, I looked it up. The last time we talked about it on this podcast was also JV's first episode of the podcast.
Wow.
And it has just been gaining traction ever since. And I liked it back then. Leo has convinced me to give it another try, and we played a little bit over the weekend and stuff. And that game is still super, super cool, Joe.
Okay.
Have you ever looked into it?
No.
Why haven't you?
Yeah, Joe.
I'm just
Why,
kidding.
why haven't you?
It's just what is wrong with you?
That sounded so accusatory, but like unexpectedly.
No, that's just not my
Uh-huh.
thing. Is
Yeah.
Leo on mic? I want to hear his thoughts about it.
Hey guys,
Oh, God. Leo.
I like it.
It's so much fun. And it's
All
great to have like an expert like Leo guiding you through because there's all the different basically heroes in this game and they all have different abilities. So they'll just be walking around and like, why does it look like I'm underwater? It's like, oh, that's a certain bomb. Or there's this dastardly move that this one hero can use. Help me out, Leo, with the name of her.
Dokebi.
Oh, probably knows where I'm going with this. But all of a sudden, we're all like huddled together. We have 5 people. We're in a room like waiting for the enemy team to come in. And then all of a sudden, all of our cell phones in the game start going off and like vibrating in our players' pockets. Like, what the hell is going on? Turns out it's a character's ability. So they just make these crazy vibrating cell phones go off. So like in the game, you have to like fumble and take out your cell phone if you want to mute it because they can be on the other side of the wall and they know exactly what room you're in at that point.
Huh.
Yeah, and shooting people through walls is a big part of that game. I'm
Yes.
just like I'm going. If I can hear you, and like I'm not gonna go around the door. I'm gonna bust this thing open or shoot you right through it. So it's very revealing if they can hear you.
Yeah.
more so than in other games.
Is that as fantastical as the abilities get, Leo? A cell phone ringing?
Not anymore. They announced 2 new characters that are coming to the game in March at the Invitational, and they talked about them a bit before then. Lion and Finka. They both have pretty sci-fi-ass abilities. Finka, I believe, she has nanomachines in your bloodstream
Ah, of course.
that she can activate remotely, and then you'll get like more accuracy and more health, and you'll move faster.
That's science.
That's science. And then Lion has like this flying drone that can't be killed and that detects every bit of movement on the map.
Oh.
So like you'll get a warning that you're about to get pulsed, and then if you're moving after that, the enemy team will see exactly where you are. And
Oh
there's
my
lots
God.
of little sci-fi touches like that, and with their new Outbreak mode, they've gone fully science fiction.
Yes, they announced this new mode. It's basically Rainbow Six Siege's version of Ghosts or Extinction, like that Call of Duty
Okay.
mode. Wait, Zombies. I meant to say not Ghosts. That's the other Call of Duty game. But Leo, did you watch footage of that? What did you think of that mode and how wacky it gets?
It looks interesting. I love that they're playing around with it a bit more. They've got like 5 special infected types, like Left 4 Dead, that all do different things. There's stealth takedowns. It's really strange and
It's-
new for the game.
Yeah, it's wild just to go from like watching a little bit of Overwatch League and just being completely overwhelmed visually, and then going to even the Grand Championships for Rainbow Six Siege. It's remarkably easy to follow, just because so many of those maps, or a fair number of them, are just like, hey, it's one house. clearing room to room, and it's so nice not to be overwhelmed by an esport, and it's super watchable, right, Leo?
Absolutely. I loved watching it. That was fantastic. And it was a really great last match, too. A really good championship.
Yeah, the crowd was just losing its mind. Joe, have we convinced you to check out Rainbow Six Siege?
No, I'll keep playing Metal Gear.
I guess if you want to do that.
Making good choices.
Yeah, it is still super fun to get into. If you have a squad of 5 people, I love Terrorist Hunt, and Leo is trying to train me how to play anything else. And it's very scary going up against real human beings, it turns out.
It is, but it's worth it. I have been playing that game every night for like a month. I can't stop. It's amazing.
Jesus. All right. Hey, Rainbow Six Siege, everybody, in 2018, still going strong. All right, now let's get emotional. Let's take a turn. Turn for the mobile, a turn for the heart. Elise.
This is the worst segue I could have imagined.
Can you come up with a better one between Rainbow Six Siege and Florence?
You really pulled that segue out of somewhere far away, like Florence.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were going to say detail. Elise, Florence is this little iOS experience.
Sure is.
Now, there's the classic, is this a game argument, but the easy pitch for this thing, just to get a framework, and I think this kind of blows out of proportion a little bit, but the easy pitch that I saw at first was, it's WarioWare meets Eternal Sunshine on mobile.
I don't know if I go that far.
It's a digital comic book.
Yeah, it's kind of like an
Interesting.
interactive graphic novel is the
Oh,
way
yeah.
I would
It's
describe it.
Beyond that, it's slightly more interactive than you'd expect if you set it up as a
Sure.
graphic novel.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I say interactive graphic
Okay.
novel.
So what is the experience like? What are you actually doing in this graphic novel?
Okay, so, well, basically, you're playing as this young girl named Florence, and she ends up meeting someone named Krish, and it's all about this relationship that develops between the two. And I think really its biggest draw is just like how grounded that story is, and it's minimally interactive, I guess you could say, but like the small actions that you do, how do I explain this?
They're really good.
They are really good.
They're
And
really clever things.
They're kind of like on some way reminds me a little bit of like What Remains of Edith Finch's short stories, like a little bit in terms of like there was that one short story where you have the camera and you're doing snapshots.
Oh right.
Whereas like in Florence, there's one where like there's a bicycle crash and you're kind of trying to focus all these different images with a slider.
Series
You're
of
trying
little.
to put them all like into focus, and like so
Yeah.
yeah, the little things like that, little jigsaw puzzles, little
Well,
math
hang on. We got to
puzzles,
focus on jigsaw puzzles because I think
Okay,
it's so
sure.
brilliant. I think
Yes.
I absolutely love this experience for what it is.
Yeah.
But one of the clever things is like you can go on a first date in this game, in this experience. I'll call it a game, by God. And so you go on this first date, and you just have a big speech bubble, and then it's like, all right, here's a bunch of jigsaw pieces. Figure out what to say. Your date just said something. Now it's time for your retort. And it's
Right.
like, okay, first date. I guess this, just awkwardly putting together this complex jigsaw puzzle, and then throughout the course of the relationship, in theory, the jigsaw like puzzle pieces get smaller and smaller and easier and easier to put together.
It was even the course of that date.
I guess you're right, yeah.
Which is what I like.
Yeah.
I thought was probably the strongest moment for me of the whole game. Is
yeah.
like in my mind that is the part of the game that where it like leverages its interactivity the best to like convey something about what's happening. In that like
for sure.
like the date starts off and it's like putting the pieces together is a little bit like clumsy and weird, and there are a lot of them, and then by the end of the date it's like super easy. You get the
Yeah,
sense that like
it's-
this conversation's like flowing between them.
Yeah.
I think what's so cool about that is like, exactly. It kind of like shows you that the conversation is flowing better, and it's like even from their facial expressions and stuff. Like you start off with like kind of like clumsily putting the jigsaw pieces together, and having trouble, and then even the music starts to go smoother, and then the puzzle pieces are bigger, and like everything just becomes smoother to like amplify this idea
Yeah.
that these two people are getting along and that it's going well. And like the fact is there's no dialogue in this. There's
Right.
no words. So everything is conveyed with like illustrations and with those like little interactive moments.
Yeah, it's a series of clever metaphors for, being in a relationship. Just simple stuff
Right.
like, she's encouraging him to do something, and so you have to like tap on the screen to like push him towards doing something. Or this is maybe a little more abstract, but eventually move in together, right? It's a
Mhm.
relationship, everybody. Hopefully there's no spoilers here. But eventually you move in together, and you have like a box of his stuff, and you're trying to fit it on the shelf. And it's like, at a certain point, you have to make a compromise and take some of your old stuff off the shelf so you can fit his stuff on the shelf before you can move on to the next sequence. It's really clever little things like that. Joe, however, hates love and fun and everything good in the world. What's your take on this, Joe?
So I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed Florence, actually.
Great.
But
End discussion.
but I think part of what what sticks for me is that like I wanted more stuff like that first date thing, more points where it felt like the interactivity was like conveying something about what was happening or the characters.
Instead of just like brushing teeth by wiping back and forth.
It's like, okay, there's a lot of brushing teeth. Or like you said,
well, it's our relationship. There's a lot of brushing teeth.
like the moving in part that you were talking about is like that's not there's no consequence for that. The game does not respond to what you take off or put on the shelf.
Doesn't it later?
It doesn't.
Okay.
I mean, unless I totally missed it, like I mean, you know, the game is about. I'm not gonna worry too much about spoilers. So like, if there's also a part. I mean, that's what it is.
Okay. I didn't have to say it, but okay.
Well, because part of it is that like there's a part where you're taking stuff off the shelf,
Right.
again, and like it did not remember the state that I had put it in before.
Right. That's what I was trying to remember. Like, how accurate is it to the state that you originally did it?
Yeah.
But it does remember certain things. Like if you're designing, you play yourself as a little girl and you're like designing a butterfly, and it like harkens back to that later. There are certain callbacks to your activities earlier on. I agree.
Yeah.
I could have used more. I was waiting. Like there's some, emotional gut punches in the game, but I was waiting for like the almighty gut punch of everything that I had done directly tying into something more specific, I guess.
Right.
Which is probably too much to hope for. This is crazy Hail Mary, but
Yeah, I guess like you said, I guess the line for this game of like, is it a game or not?
right.
I'm ultimately not super interested in that debate specifically, as much as it is like, I think to be a good game, you have to like use your interactivity really well. And to me, I think it tells a great story. I think its ambition of like, telling a sort of, like Elise said in her review, telling a sort of ordinary story in an extraordinary way, I think is like,
It's awesome.
it does that well. But as a game, as an interactive experience, I felt like it didn't really clear the bar that could have made it really special for me, partially because of like it just does such ordinary stuff with it.
I feel like sometimes when like it's hard because like when it comes to like portraying like relationships and stuff in games, like I don't always want those to be super like gamey. Do you know what I mean? Like and I look at I know maybe that's not what you're saying exactly.
No, I'm not saying gamey. Like I don't want more systems. I don't want like
Hunger meter.
Yeah.
But you're saying that you wanted the game to respond to like your earlier actions more.
Not necessarily that would be part of it, I guess. But
Sure.
for me, it's more stuff like that one, like that scene where it's the things that I'm doing, the things that I'm interacting with. It's like there's a level of feedback there, or like Edith Finch does. I mean, like Edith Finch would not work on the page. You couldn't flip that through. The way you interact with that game is like crucial to your experience with those characters in that story.
I hear you.
With Florence,
Sure.
it would be 99% as effective if I was just turning the pages.
I disagree.
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
I don't think so.
It would for me.
It seems silly to me to get like so obsessed with what this game could be when, as it stands, it's a $3 iOS thing that gives a wildly novel experience that I've never had in a game before. Playing
I
through
think
a
it was
relationship.
actually like quite ambitious what it did.
Yeah. Frankly, Joe, I think you're an
Hey,
no, that's fine.
I'm okay. If
think-
that's what I am, that's what I am.
No, but
no.
dude, you would recommend it to people. It's such a weird little thing if you're interested in an interactive relationship
I think
working right
I
through it.
went in not expecting very much, and then came out of it feeling like that was a lot more than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And that's saying something because it's a pretty short game.
Yeah, you can finish it in like 30, 40 minutes,
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that. It depends on how
exactly.
long you spend brushing your teeth, I guess.
That's how long.
I spend a lot of time brushing my teeth.
I can tell, Daddy.
I guess I'm just a big fan of those of games that do try to be kind of intimate or personal or or don't try to be like crazy like full of action or whatever, like just kind of focusing in on this young girl's like chapter in her life.
Yeah.
And I feel like I connected with her, like I'm the same age as her, and I felt like I'm like, hey, that mundane routine, like I've had that in my past too, and
Right.
like I feel like anyone, it's so relatable, and that kind of ups and downs of that relationship is something a lot of people go through, but it's done in a very like evocative way
Yeah.
that's really immersive.
And just to round out the conversation,
So
8.0 out of 10, right? At least
Yes.
it's a strange game to like reviewing this is tough, right?
It was. I think I was struggling to put it into words originally, just because it's hard because it's not the most interactive thing, like, you know, like it is, like I said, minimally.
Right.
I don't know. So it was hard, and I think it's one of those games that I kind of wished I didn't have to give it a score actually, because like I want to recommend Florence to everybody, but it's like
It's not some sort of masterpiece of game design,
Right.
Yeah.
in the way you.
Now I
you
can
might
see
have
that
said.
it's not as good as Driver
it seems
San
almost
Francisco.
like
so-
arbitrary to like. It seems like arbitrary to like add like a number to it when
Don't tell the reviews editor. He's sitting right next
I
to you.
know. I just whatever. I'm not gonna
It's
go
a
into
really
that.
tough one to review
It
for
is.
sure.
I hope
Yeah.
it comes to PC or Android because I don't have an iPhone. So
Bummer.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess it's not an Android, is it?
no,
No.
it's only iOS. But I mean, I feel like there's a good chance it could come to Android. Why not?
Yeah. Or I'm trying to think about like Steam. I guess some things are kind of more touch based, but it's not impossible that they could
you
port
could
it on
do it.
there. Yeah, I'd hope so. It's a really unique thing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite experiences of the year so far in the gaming world, I'd say. Right up there with Metal Gear Survive. You guys want to move on to some great emails?
sure.
Let's
Go
do
for
it. And welcome back to the Game Informer Show. I'm still here. We have the same wonderful crew. We also have joining us basically. It's like we're extending this table to like 1,000 times the size because we got dozens and dozens of great emails. I'd argue we got like 90 amazing emails in the last week. Whittled it down to, I don't know, 17. We're going to read off these emails that were sent into podcast@gameinformer.com, and we're going to choose our absolute favorite and then ship that person out something very, very nice. The best thing they could possibly imagine within reasonable expectations.
A copy of Metal Gear
Hey.
Survive.
That's not true.
Hey, Ben, what if someone out there has a question they want to ask us?
Yeah, they should send it to podcast@gameinformer.com.
Oh.
What should they send?
They should send news. Not enough people do this, which is tricky. I want people to send in news stories like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Because I feel like we have a lot of opinions on stuff that there's not a good avenue to share it, and maybe just is lacking overall in Game Informer. But stuff like Sledgehammer co-founders leaving. It's like, oh, it's a big deal. We have a lot of thoughts on it. I don't know where we talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
So send in news stories you want us to cover, questions, opinions, feedback, words of wisdom, anything under the sun. You know the rules, Suriel.
Yeah,
Anything that
we'll make the show better.
make the show better. Podcast@gameinformer.com. That's all we care. And speaking of the
Can
show,
you send us a different Suriel?
oh, if you think it'll make the show better, send us your custom Surreal builds.
Weeks of like random photos of people that come up when you Google Surreal, and it's just like every month we'll have our favorite Surreal of the week.
Audio listeners will love it. It'll be great. But speaking of the show, I bet there's some listeners out there that are thinking, I would like to be on that show. I could answer those emails better than Surreal ever could, if that is
I'm
his
terrible
real
at
name.
answering. I never get back to anybody.
So, Joe, have you ever heard of something called the #GI Show Challenge?
I've not. This sounds like a new thing.
This might be a new thing that we're going to try. Leo in the booth, let's prove what this new thing is. Hey, no, there's not another customer. GI Show Challenge. Something we want to try out, right? It's going to be a 2-week window. This is sparked from all those people sending in pictures of their Zunes, which had the GI Show running on it. And I said, that's so awesome. Combine that with the fact that I feel like over and over again, I say, hey, if you like this podcast, please tell a friend. Please tell a friend. Then we thought, what if we could gamify telling a friend? Wouldn't that be a cool system? So that's what we're doing. That is the #GI Show Challenge. So here's what this is. If you take a picture of your phone, subscribe to the Game Informer Show, playing the Game Informer Show, in some way showing you have subscribed to the Game Informer Show on your phone, send it in either to podcast@gameinformer.com or tweet it out with #GI Show Challenge, which we'll comb through. #GI Show Challenge. Each phone, your phone there, will be entered as an entry into a drawing, and then the winner will get to be on the email section of the podcast. And you might say, okay, that's an all right idea. Where does the telling a friend come into it?
Yeah.
This is the challenge, right? The more phones you have in the picture, subscribe to the Game Informer Show, the more entries you get in this raffle. So you might say, well, if I'm with a group of 5 friends, we can all subscribe, play the show, prove it, take a picture of it. Whose phone are you taking that picture with? That's very challenging.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? You need to find an extra phone to take a picture of all those phones.
Phones being the only thing that can take pictures.
Absolutely. I can't think of one other thing.
And to clarify, though, this is multiple phones in one picture. You
That's
can't
right.
send in multiple
No.
pictures of different phones.
No. And so whatever picture has the most phones in it, I will use that as your official entry in hashtag GI Show Challenge. I really want to know how high this number can get. And there are people out there that say, this is pandering, this is a scam to get more subscribers. They're right, but it's a fun way to do it. It's a fun community challenge. I would like that idea of like, oh, if I subscribe with my friends, how many can we get in one shot? And then we're going to have a big random number generator. We're going to figure all this out in a spreadsheet, and then we'll Skype you in so that we can do it with the international listeners. We would ship something else, like something out, but for the international listeners, we'll Skype them in.
That's a good idea.
Even if you barely speak English, it'll be fun. Please. So tweet it out. Picture of a bunch of phones playing or subscribe to the GI Show.
Playing or playing and?
Playing or. Whatever's on that screen, you just have to show that it's subscribed to the GI Show in some way, right? And so I'd imagine, like, if you're out at the bar with a bunch of friends, you convince them all to subscribe to the GI Show.
Okay.
And then you just all blast your phones playing the show. That'd be really annoying. So it's like, you just show the subscription page. That's enough.
Okay.
But I want to see how many phones can get in that one photo.
All right.
GI Show Challenge. Anyways, emails, everybody. Elise.
Did they get bonus points if they're Zunes?
Joe, I had written down, thank God I forgot, Zune's worth double, everybody. Classic GI Show rules. Zune's worth double. If you go to a Zune museum,
Your Zune was not worth anything.
now it's worth
anymore.
everything. It's worth its weight in gold.
I knew I'd need
Here
this
we
for
go.
something.
Your moment to shine.
Okay, first real email here. This is from Luke Van Eed. Cool name. Saying, you asked for it, so here it is.
Uh-oh.
I turned... No, it's nice. Don't
A picture of a Surya?
That was How's he listening? Oh, Luke's sitting right over there. Oh my God. Luke says, you asked for it. I turned on scan lines on my Super Nintendo Mini because it looks the same as my original SNES running on my CRT TV. But my HD TV is only 27 inches, so maybe having scan lines on a modern 50-inch TV would not look as authentic. The question was, who turns on scan lines with these emulators? Like the Super Nintendo Classic, the Analog NT we talked about. Like, I don't know anybody that does that, but a lot of people do. Philip Duzat wrote in saying, hey guys, using scan lines on HD retro games is my preferred way to play. I feel as though playing through with harsh, blocky HD pixels is a mistake, as all the games were made in that area with a standard def screen and thus appear as the creator intended them. Let's see, this is Scott from Manitoba. He says that he's horrified and that playing old retro pixel games in purely HD without scan lines, he says it looks like a cheap phone game. Also, he says a low poly Secret of Mana is like redrawing the Watchmen graphic novel in the style of the reboot cartoon series. Yuck. All right, Scanline fans out there.
Let's see if anyone has photos of them sending, playing games with the sort of fake arcade boards that some people will use, where it's like, oh, it's like you're playing it at a Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, and they have like the actual arcade cabinet that you're playing on.
Right.
I don't think a lot of games did it, but I can't imagine anyone likes those.
I think
Prove
there's
me wrong.
people
Prove
out
me
there that love
wrong.
all this stuff, all those options. Ben from Australia, as he calls it, Thor's country. I don't know about
What?
that.
Okay.
He says a couple weeks ago, someone wrote in and mentioned ads on loading screens.
Oh,
Joe Juba then gouged his eyes out. No.
yeah.
This reminded me of ads I saw in Battlefield Bad Company back in the day. The ads would appear as big billboards in the game, but the great thing about it was that everything was destructible in Battlefield Bad Company, so you can blow up the ads throughout the course of a match, which is pretty cool. All right, Billy from Gloucester, Virginia, friend of the show, he writes in all the time. He says, on last week's podcast, you were discussing if you'd rather have a Bioshock 3 or a Bioshock Infinite 2, based on your love for Bioshock 1 and Infinite. Am I the only one who likes Bioshock 2 the most out there? My question is, are there any games that are widely considered the weakest in their franchise that you think the opposite of and consider them the best? He then goes on and says, games like Metal Gear Solid 2, Dark Souls 2, Super Mario Bros. 2, Star Wars Force Unleashed 2. Wait a minute. Is it just that all second games are the worst? It's a theory from Billy. Metal Gear Solid 2 is my second favorite Metal Gear Solid. That does not belong on this list.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad one.
I don't think there's
I definitely
there's a
have one.
widely agreed upon bad, worst
There is.
Metal Gear Solid game,
sorry.
unless it's unless people.
Metal
it's
Gear game might be a different category.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid, divorcing it from.
Sure.
Yeah, I really liked 4, and I know a lot of people don't, but it's not my favorite one.
It's my least favorite,
Yeah.
for sure, at this point, yeah. But what about that? Is there a game that you guys, that's known as being the weak entry that you actually like, Elise?
Dragon Age 2.
Oh, you like it?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
No
yeah.
way! You
Oh.
like that better than the first one and Inquisition?
I really liked Origins, but I don't know. I know it sounds ridiculous,
Wow.
but like I probably have the fondest memories
Oh,
with
wow.
Dragon Age 2. And
Huh.
don't get me wrong, like I'm not gonna sit here and say that it's necessarily a good game. And I know its flaws, and I hate that it recycles its environments, and the combat's not great.
Yep.
That's all there. But I have always been someone who favors character development over like anything, and I just love DA2's characters so
wow.
much, and that really really stuck with me. And also I love the like that you can use sarcasm in dialogue options. That was like really.
Is that like a skill or something?
No, that's just like you can. I forget there was like 3 different ones.
Yeah,
You know, like on the circle. the
your
dialogue
responses. Yeah, your responses have different different emotions
Emotions?
attached to them. So it's
So
like
you
you
can
can
be like
respond
nice
angrily or
mean
sarcastic.
or
and-
sarcastic. So like
Okay.
I always thought sarcastic was great.
You'll never guess,
Anyway.
Elise,
Yeah.
what the environments and the overall structure of Dragon Age 2, what game those were based on. The answer is coming up in the interview later in this show. It's Eternal Darkness. Does anybody else?
Really?
Yeah, interesting.
I didn't know that.
Stay
I
tuned, he
love
talks all
Eternal
about it.
Darkness.
Does one stand out for you guys as the weakest?
I mean, I don't know that this is like it's not the same as like a long running series, but I tend to like Bionic Commando Rearmed 2 more than the first one.
Oh, that's odd.
Yeah.
What an odd thing to say.
Sorry. guys.
Into a microphone.
Oh, are these things on?
Yeah, dude.
Oh, never mind, guys. Never mind.
No, it's the specific framing is tricky. Like, what one do people think is the worst that I think is the best? Because
Yeah.
like there are definitely entries in games that I like. A lot of people don't like that I do in a series. But in terms of like the worst that I think is the best, I don't think there's one of those.
Joe's spot on all
Joe
the time.
just has.
No,
real
I'm
good-
not. Like the one that I was thinking of is like Super Mario Brothers 2. I really like Mario 2.
You think
it's
that's
not
this one?
It's not my
Yeah,
favorite
right.
one,
Yeah.
but like most people have your reaction to that
Yeah.
game, and I really like it, but it's not my favorite.
The other answer actually, which I think might be a better answer, is Pac-Man Championship Edition 2.
Ah, that's
I
right.
think when it came out, a lot of people were like, this isn't like DX or whatever, but I think it fixes a lot of the problems in DX, because I went back and played DX while reviewing CE2 and I was like, I actually think CE2 fixes pretty much all of these problems.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some graphical stuff that I'm not a fan of, but I think that game is the best one in that series.
Yeah, I remember you love that one. Joseph from Michigan says, "Hey crew, last week during the Game Club, Pokemon story was briefly mentioned. First, my condolences. Pokemon X and Y are the worst in the series, and it sucks. Those were the ones y'all played. We played Sun and Moon. We were just talking about X and Y, but thank you. I hope you give Pokemon Switch a try. I hope so too. Secondly, his question is, what's a game that has a much better story than it should? Mine would be Kirby Planet Robobot. As the paragraphs given when you pause on bosses flesh them out more than you'd think." That's Joseph from Michigan. Yeah, that's an odd one. I know people like the ending of that game a lot. I know Kyle's really hot on it, but the idea of the story and the lore of the bosses, I had no idea. What comes to mind?
The one that stands out for me in that department is getting maybe a little weird, but it's Dragon's Dogma, which starts out like you just end up thinking it's a boilerplate fantasy world,
Yeah.
which it is for most of the game, and then the story gets super interesting and crazy in like the final stretch. I really, really like Dragon's Dogma story.
Just like as far as what's really going on in the world or characters or
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There is. I don't want to spoil it
No, you
for people.
spoiled Florence already. Might as well have at it.
Well.
It's all right. It's a good question. It's like I was thinking to like what Suriel was talking about earlier in the episode about Metal Gear Survive, where it's like you are curious to see where it ends up. And I feel like, is that just the core of this question? Is something you shouldn't care about, but you are really curious to see where it ends up? And I think back to playing NBA 2K16, that dumb Spike Lee story mode. It's like I was very curious to see where that went. Or even Dragon Ball Fighter Z's story mode, which I finished up this last weekend, Suriel. I was just so desperate to learn, where did Android 21 come from? Because that was the big mystery on the cover story trip, and I played through that entire story mode, which is like 20 hours long. 20 hours! And then I just had a big fat wet nothing at the end.
I mean, they do tell you. It's just you have to.
barely! It's like, hey, she was
tell you-
made.
they
Figure
tell
it
you
out,
the-
dummies.
They tell you the factoid of where she comes from, but they don't. It's this weird moment that they hide behind, and then they're just like, whatever.
She said she used to be a human. There's like plenty of like little hints of like something interesting in the Dragon Ball world, and What a slog! 20 hours, Cyril. That took so long.
Yeah, you can definitely get through it faster than that. But like, if you want to do, if you rush, but
Right.
you have to play the game in this very specific manner.
Yeah. Oh, those clone fights. All right. Yeah, some games have better stories than you think. I was also thinking with this question. I was thinking of I know people like the story in these games, so I don't know if it fits exactly, but I feel like the ending to Arkham Knight is still underrated. Without spoiling that, I feel like that entire ending sequence where it gets a little trippier and stranger, I think it's so cool, and I don't hear anybody ever talk about it.
Arkham Knight was the third one, right?
Yes.
Well, fourth technically, but yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The third Rocksteady one.
Right.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one that I stopped playing. Like I didn't get to
Oh,
the end.
really?
Of that thing. No, I thought the like tank Batmobile stuff
Oh my
was
God, I
so
hated
bad.
that.
There's
just
so
stopped.
much of it towards the end as
yeah,
well.
I just stopped.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you. Here's a weird one. John from Mississippi writes in and says, "Hey, GI has never given a 3D Zelda game below a 975." It's crazy. I didn't know.
Okay.
Joe's already angry. I'd like to hear y'all rank them, since score-wise they're all within a fourth of a point of each other.
all of the
The
Zeldas?
3D Zeldas. So
Oh,
there
okay.
are
All
only 6, right? So it's he says, in case you're wondering, here's the correct ranking. It's Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess number 2, Ocarina of Time 3, Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword, Wind Waker. This is impossible because we don't have the people who reviewed these games on the table here and whatnot.
Yeah.
But boy, Twilight Princess is number 2 here, John. That seems
It's a
pretty
little
high.
It's
Yeah,
almost
let's,
like 4 spots too high.
yeah, let's go ahead and slide that to the bottom. So clearly Breath of the Wild's number 1, no matter what, right? Absolutely no matter what.
Yeah.
I recuse myself from this question.
All right. Elise, how would you rank these things?
I don't think Breath of the Wild will not be first for me.
What is number 1 3D Zelda for you?
Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the other one. That's
Uh,
those are the two that I'm
yeah.
juggling in my head for 1 and 2. At least you have a rank. Like, do you have your ranking? Or...
Well, I didn't play Skyward Sword,
So that's at the bottom.
so
I think
Not
it's how it
applicable.
works. All right.
yeah.
From what I understand about these games, it's weird to put Twilight Princess above Ocarina of Time,
It is
considering
odd.
that
I
it's
am-
like
I-
so
this-
similar in so
Sorry,
many
go
ways,
on.
right?
There are parts
Right.
of Twilight Princess that drag on for.
I
longer
I
than
think
it
I'm a
should.
bigger fan of Wind Waker than most people, so it'd probably actually be my second.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that fan
Um,
base. I can see that.
And
Okay.
I think I'm harsher on Majora's Mask than most people.
Ooh,
So that would be on the
Can't
lower
say
side
that.
of the list. So,
Okay.
yeah.
The bottom of the list?
No. Probably like. Okay, for me, it would be Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Majora's Mask. What's the last one I'm missing?
Skyward Sword.
Skyward Sword.
Wait,
there we go.
That's the one I haven't.
You
5 or
forgot
6?
Or did I
Breath of
forget?
the Wild, Twilight Princess?
No, I said Twilight Princess.
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild, I haven't played a whole lot of,
Oh,
honestly, because
Elise.
I just couldn't get into it.
Oh,
I don't know. I'm
That's
just one
correct.
of those people.
That's correct.
breaking.
Breath of the Wild is just not on the list for me.
Not even applicable. All right. And
Where am I gonna
Elisa's,
put it?
yeah, her ranking is the official Game
final,
Informer
yeah.
one now,
Yeah.
so I'll be damned.
I think I would probably go. I think Ocarina still edges it out, and then Breath of the Wild, then probably Wind Waker, then Majora's Mask, then Twilight Princess, and then Skyward Sword.
Really?
Am I missing one?
No, I think
Not
you got
a
it,
lot
man.
of love for Skyward Sword. out
It's-
here.
You know, it's a tough one.
Skyward Sword, I will go on record and saying I think it probably has the best dungeons in the series. I think the rest of that game is mediocre.
Swimming around collecting those music
Yep,
notes.
the Silent
Ugh.
Realm and like just I did not get into the flying aspect of that game at all. It is the start of that game is glacial in pacing.
Still
It
a
is-
great game overall, but it's just kind of annoying
yeah,
to go
it
back
is
to
a
at
lot
this
of
point.
it is the most uneven Zelda like of those games.
Yeah, for sure. Beth from Cleveland writes in and says, "Hey, crew, I don't think there's ever been a game soundtrack that I've listened to more than the one from Ian Setsuna. I put it on as background
Oh.
noise while I'm working and cooking. I sometimes deal with anxiety and insomnia, and this soundtrack seems to calm me or help me sleep consistently. I think the game will too if you ever play that, Beth from Cleveland." He says, plus the all piano tracks are perfect in the winter when those things are at their worst, and the snow obviously reminds me of the game. Are there any game soundtracks you keep coming back to for a specific reason? What music, gaming or otherwise, do you find most calming when you are stressed?
I have a lot.
The calming soundtrack.
I'm Setsuna is a good that's a good.
I would have
option
never.
for
I would
that.
never thought of that.
Yeah, a lot of piano.
I listen to a lot of Final Fantasy VI.
6.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have that one and Journey. I go back to a lot. When I was just thinking, this is the iOS game Swords and Sorcery
Oh
has a
yeah.
really good soundtrack.
I've been listening to that forever. That's a great choice
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I listened to that one quite a bit.
Yeah, people don't really talk about that game anymore. It was a
Yeah.
big deal like when it came
was,
out.
It
and
was, and then it kind of just fizzled out, I guess.
then- yeah.
I think Chrono Cross is probably my biggest one
Yeah.
that I go back to. In a lot of cases, especially for like Final Fantasy VI, is one that like I can't just listen to that as like background music because then I just get thinking about the game and want to play the game. You know,
That's very dorky.
I have 3 that I revisit. Well, I mean, 2.5 basically. Like the Bionic, the Bionic Commando Rearmed soundtrack, I think is really good.
What about Rearm 2 though? I hear that's better.
It's garbage.
They have
Unlistenable.
not made that one available in a method that in a way I can actually listen to it, but that one's also good. And then the Shatter soundtrack, that weird Breakout 2009 game.
What?
That was
Shatter?
Shatter. It was
Never heard of
It was
this.
like a Breakout clone, but it was like the music in it is really really good. Came out at an
Deep cuts.
yeah,
Damn.
it is
Alright.
it's really good.
Alright.
And then the reason I say 2.5 is my work music is basically the Clouds theme from the first Nidhogg on loop for an hour.
Holy
That is
cow.
that is the thing that I work to.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Just because it is upbeat enough to where it's like it kind of gets you in a mood, but
Yeah.
it's not super distracting. And it's because sometimes if I listen to actual music while I work, I feel like I get into the lyrics or whatever, or
Yep.
like just
I listen to almost strictly instrumental.
Yeah.
It's gotta be.
Yeah.
so it's just like it is just the thing where it's like I am setting this, I don't have to worry about it. Sometimes if like when you change between songs, your sort of attention span kind of gets weird, but
Yeah.
just having that one beat on loop for an hour, I think it like gets me in a working mood better than pretty much
I'll
anything
be damned.
else.
The most productive soundtrack in the world. Still, I'd argue SimCity 2013. I know Jojuba, you
No.
hate it. No, you listened to it recently, right?
You suggested on Twitter that I check it out again, and I did as I was doing some writing for this issue, and I still stand by my statement that like if you listen to something else while you're playing that game, that's like that would probably be more interesting. Like you can
Okay.
listen, like there are more engaging things that you can listen to without sacrificing anything
Sure.
and play SimCity.
Okay.
But if you're just looking for like relaxing background music, that is a great choice.
It feels productive at all
Yeah.
times. But realistically, there's one soundtrack. It's not even a soundtrack. It's a piano cover of an entire game soundtrack that it has like 200,000 views on YouTube, and I think at least 100,000 of them are from me. Back like at the old TV station I used to work at, I would listen to this every day. It's the World of Goo soundtrack, just one person playing a piano. And the audio quality sucks, and they F up constantly, but I just know every
Nice.
mistake they're going to make because I've listened to that version
Okay.
so many times.
Oh, that reminds me. There's like some really good like piano covers of Undertale songs.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I listen to those sometimes, but like often I don't, just because there's like a lot of those songs are just so upbeat and just like get you really amped up. And usually like when I write, I want something more subdued.
Yeah, we need
So-
relaxing, cool person music for written think pieces. Dalen Briggs from Iowa writes in and says, "Hello, podcast participants. That's us. My question is deceptively simple. What is your first and second favorite Rockstar game?" I had to say first and second because I didn't want to give Red Dead Redemption the only game to be mentioned. Personally, I would say first for me is GTA Vice City, and second is LA Noire. By the way, Dalen also wrote in saying we should do LA Noire as a game club, which is an interesting idea. And he says, "Thanks for answering." So first and second. First has to be Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah.
This is sweep the
Yeah.
table.
So, well, actually, I'm playing Red Dead Redemption right now
Oh,
for
really?
kind of the first time, sort of, where it's like I played it when it came out, and I got to Mexico.
Yeah.
Which I know is where everyone says like, "Oh, that gets so slow," and like that's where a lot of people fall. I didn't fall off for those reasons there. It's like when you get to Mexico, it's sort of a clean slate, right? It's like, oh, here's a new map, new
Right.
things to go do. So there's something that's a little bit daunting about just like setting out and doing that
Yeah.
all over again when I like that first part of the game so much. And then there was an intersection of former editor Tim Turi sort of inadvertently spoiled the ending for me.
Joe, we just talked about this like 2 weeks ago on the podcast.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, we talked about this exact thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not you playing
Yeah.
the game though. How was it? To go
Yeah,
back
well,
to?
look, so my point being, I stopped playing because of those things then, and now I am totally loving it, and I'm like,
Holds up well.
I am almost to the point where I like stopped playing the first time. I am really digging it,
Very
and
nice.
but it's in my mind, it's gonna have a tough time beating Bully. I think it's Bully and Red Dead.
Mm.
Bully Red
Oh,
Dead.
Bully's your first.
I'm glad to hear it's
Oh,
aged well
wow.
because I plan to go back to it this year.
Yeah, I kind of want to as well. Maybe we should just make it a game club at some
Yeah,
point.
that I would be down for that.
It's so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd go Red Dead, and then number 2 is San Andreas. I love San Andreas so much.
I feel like it's so hard for me to pick. I just like, I mean, Red Dead Redemption is definitely my first, and that was the one game that like I was playing in the basement of like my parents' house, and like I just like I was in that basement for like a week, and I was just like, this is the best. Like,
Yeah.
I'd wake up in the morning and be like, can't wait to play more. Red
I'm never
Dead.
coming
Wow.
upstairs, Mom.
Like totally dorky, but okay.
And number
so,
2 is Revolver.
That's right. Table tennis.
So number 2, I love Bully, but I don't think it's my second. I love L.A. Noire.
Gotta lock it in. Gotta lock it
I
in.
think GTA 5 would be
GTA
my-
5,
would be my
interesting.
second.
I'd probably
Yeah.
go Red Dead number 1 and then GTA 4. And I think GTA 5, I think in a lot of ways is a better game, but I still like 4 story more than pretty much almost anything else Rockstar's done.
Yeah. So it's pretty wild that a Rockstar, company's been around for so long that, I know it was a long time ago, 2010 when Red Dead came out, but it's pretty wild that like everyone's just agreed like, oh yeah, Red Dead's number 1. Like that a company with that much of a history and impact in the industry that's still so recently, it's like, well, that's their best work ever.
It holds up so
It's
well.
so good.
Still, yeah. And Vice City is a really interesting choice on there too. That's probably my number 3. I
Yeah.
really like that one.
Worst mistake was one time we did a replay of Vice City. I think it was the Vice City one, and I somehow messed up the tech. It never happens, and there was no audio. It's like playing Vice City like without that soundtrack. It's like, oh, boy, what a waste of a
that
replay.
stinks.
Anyways, Liam Wilson writes in with an uplifting question saying, "Hello, crew. Liam from North Carolina here. In each of your personal opinions, what would be the worst case scenario that you can envision for the games industry as a whole for the next decade? Are there any negative trends you foresee popping up in gaming by the year 2028 that worry you? Thanks as always." Return of arcades would probably be the worst case scenario. That's the silliest thing.
I mean,
I think wait. Go ahead, Sarah.
I think the worst thing that I can imagine is that besides like stuff like the world ends or like everyone dies.
Boo-hoo.
Yeah, right. Like I feel like it's possible that the war for precious metals at some point makes video game production untenable.
What kind
just
of
like-
Metal Gear plot
Well,
are you
just like
talking
the
about?
stuff that they make microchips out of, and
Yeah.
like silicon. Like there was like a book around the time that I read around the time of like Black Ops 2. It's just like at some point these sort of precious metals might become super valuable and might already be, and just to the point where they might end up being a huge problem for us going forward. And so if those become super precious, it might be a lot harder for video games to even get made.
PlayStationium?
Wow.
That's right.
Okay. Oh my god, I hope they don't run out of that. That's a crazy theory, Serial. That's interesting. So what? We have to go back to tabletop games?
I don't know, maybe making them figure out a way to make computers without microchips, which seems pretty difficult. But
Labo's really ahead of the game here.
that's right.
It's like a post-apocalyptic society. Just using
Everything's
cardboard.
My cardboard family is very happy.
Yeah.
I mean, the obvious one is like microtransactions, multiple currencies, free to play hell. Welcome to the future.
Yeah.
Man machine, the future,
probably
as
the
Trials once said.
I was over the weekend. I was playing a free-to-play mobile game called Cat Condo.
That
And-
sounds awesome.
He said in his most NPR voice.
But well,
Kicks
so
Florence's ass, tell you that much.
it does not. It absolutely does not. But one thing that struck me about it, and I have not played like a lot of mobile games in recent years, and especially not free-to-play stuff.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me that I guess is just a totally common thing now is like, instead of just being like, hey, do you want more of this in-game currency? Pay real money for it. Now there's this pervasive like, hey, do you want more of this in-game currency? Just watch this 30-second ad.
Oh yeah.
You want to double this? Watch this 30-second ad. So it's just like
It's your favorite games, ads and games.
yeah, exactly. Exactly, which we talked about already. But I get like this is just piggybacking off of what you said of like just going down the
That's-
road of this like a free to play hell.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Which-
And that's like it's just so you see that all the time now in mobile games. Like almost everything you play is just like you want to keep it's like, oh, you've been playing this for an hour. If you want to keep playing, watch these 3 ads.
Good times.
Yeah.
Mason Parker writes in from Grand Prairie, Texas, and says, with the recent announcement of the Nintendo partnering with Illumination for the Mario movie, I got to thinking, surely it will kill in the box office, so maybe we'll get other Nintendo movies, and then eventually are we going to get the Avengers-esque Super Smash Brothers movie? Which I am upset with myself that I didn't think of that idea of like the idea of the Nintendo cinematic universe building up to Smash Brothers as their like Avengers like
Super Mario, the
culmination.
first Smash Brothers.
That'd be so absurd.
Can I go? I want to go back to the worst case scenario one.
Oh yeah, is it the Super Smash Brothers movie?
No.
Oh.
A different thing occurred to me a little bit more, and that's, I think, like the elimination of single player experiences down the road, and I think that's different from the free to play one. Just like in the sense that the games that I love, which are these like massive single player RPGs, usually are the ones that I get like really involved in, or big open world games. Like those are super expensive, and companies know that you're getting money from the consumer at one point usually,
Right.
and like when they buy the game. And these sort of like persistent online immersive asynchronous whatever like all of those sorts of things that prolong the lifespan of a game just lean further and further away from the just sort of isolated immersive
Right.
stuff that I like.
A good benchmark is going to be whatever GTA 6 is.
Yeah.
Very curious. Okay, here's an email for Joe from Walters.
Uh-oh.
Here we go. He says, what is the hate of lock-picking minigames? I don't really mean that. I get the hate. But a lot of them are trash just to act out to pad the game, but I believe they can enhance certain elements of game systems. I will not only state my claim, but defend it as well. Exhibit A, Splinter Cell games. Remember those? I mean the stealthy ones, he says. Does
Good
anybody
point.
recall Splinter? I don't recall what that is. He says, I believe having to actively pick a lock, knowing that a guard or camera could catch you in the act, adds a lot of tension. They could have made it a hold down A for 3 seconds mechanic, but that doesn't feel rewarding. Getting good at the minigame makes doing it quickly even more rewarding to get in and out of the game. In the game, you can get into the room quicker. Outside of the game, as a player, you feel that mastering a system leads to a positive result. You haven't wasted your time. Exhibit B, Skyrim. I've just started playing Skyrim in the year 2018, and I'm thankful for the lock-picking minigame. My lock-picking skill is at 80, and I've yet to upgrade that tree. I don't feel the need to make any level of lock easier to pick because I've gotten really good at the minigame. Checkmate, he says.
I
Shut up, Joe, he says.
In at least the Skyrim situation, it doesn't feel like. I mean, maybe he got good at the game, but like I feel like I don't know that you lose much by just saying like if your lock picking skill is up at this point, you can just open any lock. I don't know how.
Right.
Yeah. Like.
And I think he's the suggestion that he debunks, I think, is a good one for Splinter Cell, where it's like, if you want that tension of you might get caught in the act, make it be a time-consuming thing, even the way that, like, well...
He says it doesn't feel rewarding, though.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel rewarding playing, like, getting good at these stupid games that are shoehorned in.
Don't call him stupid. Joe, come on.
I mean, like playing even Metal Gear Survive, I like the idea, even though it does have a lockpicking minigame with the chest. But like just with doors, you just sit there and you have to do the animation, and there is that tension of okay, is this monster gonna attack me before I can open the door? The one that is an actual game just convolutes it to a point where it's just at some point you just get good enough at those lockpicking minigames that they're just not. They just feel like a formality.
Yeah.
Or they're so bad that they're just frustrating. You're just like, I don't want to ever go near a lock because this game is so bad.
And the middle ground is that they're just boring.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's any point of that on that spectrum where like it gets to be something that you actively look forward to and enjoy.
Checkmate.
Yeah, I think most lockpicking games are kind of just mundane. I think like, or if you look at like Cyberpunk games and it's like a hacking mini game, those can be more fun. Like I enjoyed the human
likes pipe
revolution.
dreams?
I like
stuff.
Nier Automata's weirdo arcade hacking thing. I think that's cool,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel like hacking. It's just like a little shooting
I
minigame
don't
thing.
know. I feel like they're fine.
They're fine. Everything's fine, Joe. Leave it alone.
Okay. I'll be quiet. Sorry.
Okay, this is Bob Buell from self-declared God's country, Union, New Jersey. I don't know about that, Bob. He says, good job, Bob. He says, to Hanson and the non-Hansons, if all of Game Informer had entrance music, what song would everyone have?
Boy.
I think one time when we introduced Kim on the podcast, I played that. I don't know what the song's called, but the Chicago Bulls player entrance song, which is probably the best
I
song
remember
ever
that,
written.
yeah.
Is it y'all ready for this?
No, it's the.
Oh.
I think it's
Oh.
like, God, it's some old 70s hack. It's like Dan Fogarty wrote it or some nonsense like that you forget about. Serial, do you have entrance music?
I do, and I think Leo has it as well.
What? Well, you have to enter the entrance music, so you have to go away
Okay,
first.
All right.
It's all.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, for the audio listeners, Serial's taking his headphones off, flicking us off, and then walking away. The funny part is now he's not wearing the headphones, so he won't be able to hear his own entrance music as he enters. All right, so all right, take it away. Entrance music for Serial Vasquez.
What are we going to do? Go for snow cone?
Oh,
No! I can't believe what I see. Everything's upside down and it makes no
for the audio listeners, he's flailing around wildly, saying, "Can you hear me?" or whatever the wrestlers say. What is this?
It's that Donkey. It's that song from the Donkey Kong.
Oh my God, I forgot about this. That's an amazing
Also,
cut.
I was doing a Hulk Hogan-esque bit.
Oh, you can't say that
That's
publicly anymore. I feel like Joe. I know what yours would be,
Yeah.
even without you. So you just want to take your headphones off, and then as you're walking in,
Wait, I don't even get to hear it.
no, trust me, you're so
don't even
coordinated.
know what it
It'll
is.
be perfect no matter what physical action you do.
Okay.
And at least if you have one cooked up, we can figure it out in a little bit here. But well, she has dignity. She has grace, Joe Juba. All right, the Joe Juba entrance music above all else. It could be more offensive, I promise. Everybody, Joe Juba! He's walking in now. He's walking in now. There's no music playing, but he's walking in now. Hang on, let Leo.
I have no idea what song you're talking about.
I thought the bit was there was no song
I thought
playing
that
and we
was
were all
actually-
pretending.
I thought that
So
was
that's
the
why I started
joke.
nodding my head of just like, yeah,
Joe,
this is
you look
good
like a real
music.
I
ass
thought the
walking
joke was
Music
that
play-
there actually is no music for Joe.
All right. Well, there we go.
Sorry, I was thinking, Leo, of the one time that I sang karaoke with Joe, and he immediately went for Constantinople as his cool song for karaoke, which is such a weird, dorky choice. I love it, but no one would ever guess. So that was what I had.
That
in
did
mind.
not go over super well in the Japanese karaoke.
They were horrified.
Yeah.
They hate that city.
I would.
weren't familiar with the song.
I understand that. I would have to go with one which really put me down a dark rabbit hole this morning of just listening to the soundtrack again and thinking it's the best thing ever. So let's see, Leo, you got this one? Okay, all right. This is a slow burn, so I'm gonna have to time it a little bit. But hang on, I'll be right back. Oh, it hasn't even kicked in yet. Okay, here we go.
You were just rocking in.
God, that would have looked so cooler. Okay, hang on. It's the greatest song ever written by a mortal man. Bruce Falconer's Perfect Cell theme from Dragon Ball Z. F Kai, forget that new music. This is the bad guy's theme when he gets like perfect and he walks in with his squeaky little shoes.
Okay.
Anyways, there it is.
Wait, what about Elise?
At least you have one in mind so that you can go whisper to Leo.
Oh, God, I don't know. I can't think of anything right
I have
now.
one in mind. I can. whisper
Oh,
to Leo.
okay, yeah. So at least you
Okay.
have to go out there,
Okay.
and then we'll let you know when this mysterious song starts.
I don't even know what it'll be.
It's going to be really respectful. It's probably going to be Final Fantasy VI music.
Mm.
I like podcasts where people are just running around the
Yeah.
studio.
Really works for the audio listener.
I'm sorry, audio listeners. If you don't know what we look like, we're all extremely graceful. It looks badass as hell when we walk in.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, as badass as DT.
We added like 40 more cameras just to capture the best angle for us coming in. It's you should watch the video version.
It's basically the entire video version of the podcast on YouTube. You can find it if you want to, but it's like it's all shot with the Matrix camera, right? Where it just kind of flash fires around.
yeah.
Are those cheap these days?
No.
I want one.
Yeah, it's just us doing the thing where we bend over, but we're dodging like people's opinions instead of
Right.
bullets.
Zelda 3D rankings.
That's right.
Okay, without further ado, Leo, Elise Favis!
What is it?
You're the worst, Joe.
She clearly stated she was 25, Joe.
Joe!
Hey, that's mean, dude. All right, thank you so much, Teenage Dirtbag. Thank you, Elise, for joining us.
I'll say for the record, Hanson did tell me what to do for Joe. It was just 2 hours ago, so I forgot.
How dare you? It's a very specific thing. All right.
Okay.
Phil Williams writes in and says, "Hello, crew. I don't know about you, but I've been obsessively buying and playing games on my Switch. Almost to the point where I look at my PS4 like it's out of touch or old now. PS4 is out of touch. Blaming the console. Like, screw you,
No,
box.
it's the console who is wrong.
He said, "This is weird for me considering remote play functionality with the PS4 on Vita was available before the Switch and after. Why doesn't Sony talk about this feature? I understand they have sent the Vita out to pasture. However, this functionality is great and it works.
Yeah.
Not only as game mirroring device, but as an extra controller for the PS4, just like a Joy-Con. P.S. Your hair doesn't look weird anymore since the shaving. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, do you guys, what do you think about this?
I actually use the PS4 remote play every once in a while. Like it actually works real well if you have like high speed internet and that like yeah.
So you're playing
So-
your PS4 games on your Vita?
No, actually I just play from like my laptop sometimes from my room. That was before I had a TV in my room. And
You can
yeah.
do that?
Yeah. Like if you have a strong enough internet connection, then you can just download. I have a Mac, so I download this app that's like remote play, and then I can play my PS4 on my laptop screen.
Oh, wow. See,
Stream
this kind of
it,
functionality,
It's great.
it's cool. I'm confused
but
by
it
it
can,
still.
It can really mess up though. Like if your internet starts like
Yeah. Also, the latency on it is not great.
yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the last
really.
time I used
But-
it was on the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no. I've if you put it on like if you're on like the highest setting, then the latency gets even worse.
Yeah.
But I had it on like a lower setting and it was actually working pretty fine for like Persona 5.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't use like a shooter or anything, but like for that kind of turn-based thing, it worked.
It's
out.
so tough to convey that. What do they like? Make a YouTube video, PlayStation, where it outlines like, here's all the possible ways you can play with this thing in the year 2018. It's like it's a tough thing to communicate.
It's also one of those things where it's like, what does that sell you? Like a Vita, which we don't really want no one to mention anymore. A PC that you already have. Like there's
Right.
no avenue where them advertising that feature does anything for them. Like it doesn't sell another
I think
device.
it sells PS4s. If someone has a Vita, it would help to like, and they don't have a PS4.
If you have a Vita and you don't have a PS4, write into podcast@gameformer.com.
I bought a
With
Vita
the
and then
scan
gave
line.
up on video games. It's so bad.
It just seems so out of touch.
It's like the one time that I tried remote play, and maybe this was my mistake, is that I was playing Diablo 3
okay.
on it. But I was like here at work playing it like over lunch, and it was just it was so laggy. The performance was so
But-
bad.
I like if you're the only one using a like high speed internet connection, then it's fine. Like I could see at work here,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
that would be awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah, it's not great.
yeah.
Not
The,
great.
the last time I used it was when for Injustice 2, because there's a mode where you can grind out certain fights in an arcade mode to get loot, but you can set it so that you can have one of your your loadouts be an AI, but you still have to press A every once in or X every once in a while to proceed to the next fight.
Okay.
So I would just set it out like I was like I think I watched the movie and I would just press X on the Vita every once in a while just to keep going through those fights.
That's the gaming world you've brought us to, Warner Brothers. Are you happy with what you've brought?
Hey, I got some loot out of it.
Ugh.
And I think that there's a lot to be said for Nintendo's approach to just making that super easy. Like,
Yeah.
even if you can do that stuff on PS4, we're all here just
Right.
being like, oh, I didn't know you could do that with it. Whereas it's so different with the Switch, where it's like, I pick it up and I can play it, or I put it in this dock and
it
it's on
works
my
the
TV.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, that's-
Parties on a rooftop.
In a
I
lot of
am
ways,
there.
it's not really a comparable feature because I mean, even at its best, you still need 2 devices to make remote play work.
Right.
Sure.
Whereas with the Switch, it is just the core conceit of that console. You don't need anything else.
Brett Williams from Martinsville, Indiana, has an interesting question saying, I love the Family Guy parodies of Star Wars. While we're not going to argue about the quality of Family Guy, some of the jokes in those 3 episodes are spot on, and I can't help but think of them every time I watch the actual Star Wars movies. I like, the first one was okay. Second 2 were rough, but I like in that Family Guy Star Wars parodies, there's just a dumb little line where after they shoot the TIE fighters, like Luke and Han, Han says, "Great kid, don't get penisy." That's the level of humor that are in these. Anyways, what are some of your favorite parodies to watch? I love the show, and as a response to Ben Reeves, I usually listen to the show while grading homework. Cool.
Oh.
He finds the homework in the dumpster out back behind his school. He says that. No, I assume he's a teacher. The best parodies of all time. What would you guys say?
I see. I thought we were going into this with like gaming parodies.
Oh,
like, what are the
Like
best?
Mad Hazard?
Well, like my example was going to be Half Minute Hero, which is the way it parodies the RPG genre.
That's interesting.
But in terms of actual parodies, I'd have to think.
Well,
about it.
Happened Hero, you consider that a parody?
Yeah, I think it's a parody of the RPG genre. Of just
Okay.
like we're just gonna expedite all the weird grindy bits of RPGs and have a lot of fun with the idea of the combat system. It's just these 2 figures on the screen just bashing heads for a second.
Yeah. I'm gonna sound like a broken record recommending SimCity 2013 soundtrack in this episode and the go-to best parody and best thing on the internet, The Onion Sex House, their parody of reality TV series. Leo, so help me God, if by next week's podcast you haven't listened to Sex House, you're out of the booth. It's the best thing. Don't spoil it for yourself. Just start watching it. It's an hour in total. Amazing parody of reality TV.
Sex House is fantastic. And The Onion also has in a similar, they had like a video parody initiative for a little while because like
It's very lucrative.
alongside Sex House there came Lake Dredge Appraisal, which was also fantastic.
It's just Antiques Roadshow, but there's just crap they dug up out of a lake.
Yep.
And one of them turns in just a mound of filth on the bottom of the lake. It's like, it's just a pile of
And the
filth.
value is always like, between 80 cents and a few bucks. It's but then also on the reality
Wait,
TV.
hey, real quick. And then the guy who's actually doing the appraising, in one episode, they dig up on the bottom of a lake this old painting that has like a picture of him in it. And he's like horrified by how his painting was at the bottom of the lake from the 1800s.
Oh man, you should watch these.
It's funny.
But then another like great parody. I'm maybe surprising some people. I really enjoyed the show The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, and there is a
Cool.
great parody of that called Burning Love that has like tons of people you would recognize, like Ken Marino and Michael Ian Black.
Oh, wow.
And a bunch of people who you've seen in tons of different comedy shows, and you're like, oh, it's that person.
All your favorite VH1 specials.
Anyway, it's really funny.
There we go. Nathan from Alva, Oklahoma says, hey guys, with Capcom recently, I missed this. This is so weird. With Capcom recently offering cash prizes to anybody who can offer proof of real cryptozoological monsters, it got me wondering, are there any cryptozoological creatures that anyone up at GI believes in? Sasquatch? Mothman? Hodag? What is that? Has anyone ever heard of this? Did he make it up? That's basically, does anybody here believe in Mothman? For number one, the go-to cryptozoological thing.
That's a weird. I had not heard of that.
That's very weird.
Huh.
I
Yeah.
didn't hear about that either.
It's a pretty clever way to market Monster Hunter World. It's like, hey, we'll give $100,000 to anybody who proves Bigfoot exists. Hope you're looking forward to this Anjanath fight.
In Wisconsin folklore, the hodag is a fearsome critter. Its history is focused mainly around the city of Rhinelander in northern Wisconsin,
Oh, God's country.
where it was said to have been discovered. It is also mentioned in several Paul Bunyan stories.
Really? So it's like the Jersey Devil for Wisconsin?
I guess.
The terror of Rhinelander.
Paul Bunyan wouldn't even be able to see it. It was just like this little rat thing running around on the ground. He
Yeah.
shouldn't care.
I
He's
don't
got
know.
a blue ox, the ultimate cryptozoological find. It's much more interesting
I
than
believe in
Hodag.
Paul Bunyan's blue ox. Don't-
Don't be naive.
Hey, that's not a cryptozoological creature. That's a real thing.
That's weird.
Well, you look at like Jane Goodall believes in Bigfoot. Are we naive to say absolutely Bigfoot doesn't exist? I think if you would have asked me this 15 years ago, I would have said, yeah, but I'm probably teetering on that 50-50 veering into the probably not area at this point, right?
I've gotten to the point where at this point I wouldn't be surprised either way. Like
Really?
if I don't think he exists, but if someone says like, no, Bigfoot's totally real, it turns out it was just this old man that lived in the mountains or whatever, I would be like, of course, yeah, sure. Like after the whole thing with like Area 51 and then like talking about how
Then Bigfoot isn't really real. It's just an old man.
I mean, Bigfoot was a real old man.
Serial, I have bad news for you. If you go to an old folks' home, it is just lousy with big feet. Go there with a butterfly net. All right, Casey. Oh, sorry, Joe. This is another question for you.
Got it.
Casey from Tampa, Florida says, and I don't agree with this greeting. He says, "Hey, Ben and the boobs." Come on, Casey. Anyways, he says, "Hey, I recently bought an Xbox One S and set out on a quest to play everything I'd missed out on in the previous generation." This email is not going the direction you think it is.
Okay.
He wanted to broaden his horizons, which turned out to be a lot of games. The other day, I started playing Dragon Age Origins for the first time and was struck by something I had always remembered from your magazine, but had never had context for. I remember reading Game Informer in high school around 8 years ago, and my friends and I were laughing very hard at a small little caption that almost seemed like a throwaway line next to a picture of a character that said something along the lines of, "We don't know why anyone would like insert character name here. He's a stupid wiener." It was hilarious. At the time, I had close to zero interest in Dragon Age, but now I'm enjoying it quite a bit. 10 hours in, I'm 90% certain that the caption was a reference to Alistair in Origins, since I vaguely remember the picture with the caption looking like that character. Maybe I'm wrong. So he's wondering, does anybody know what he's talking about? Joe, did you ever call Alistair a wiener?
I know exactly what he's talking about. Alistair, the year that Dragon Age came out, made our dorks list. And I'm pretty sure that I called him a wiener in the dorks list.
So it wasn't a caption for a picture where you called him a stupid wiener?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you call a caption for a picture. I mean, the dorks list would be like a banner sort of thing at the bottom of the page where there is a picture and then a
Right.
small like bit of text underneath.
okay.
Okay.
So maybe not a caption in the traditional sense of like, you know, the strict definition of caption, but it was a
Right.
text blur below a picture that we called him. I'm pretty sure I called him a wiener.
Do you stand by that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, Alistair is the worst.
2018
Yeah, I can-
stupid wiener
I
of
can,
the year.
second that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wieners age like a fine wine.
Now I know I'm going to get hate mail for that actually, because there is a whole contingent of people out there who just love that that BioWare archetype that Alistair represents.
He's a stupid winner in our minds,
Yeah.
eh?
So I'm sorry, everyone.
That's all right. I love that Dragon Age has come up naturally twice on this podcast, which has the creative director of Dragon Age
Yeah, that's
coming
great.
up for the interview
Works
later
out.
on. It all works
Very,
out.
very well.
What do you guys like for email of the week?
I think the worst case scenario trends.
Yeah.
was a pretty cool one.
That's an interesting one to think about.
It
Yeah.
is dark, but I like it.
Either that or the wrestling entry.
Wrestling's good.
Yeah.
Nah, not that
Or
one. Leo
entrance
botched my
music.
entrance.
Leo, you robbed him of his comedy. Yeah, I like the worst case scenario 10 years
Sure.
out, just for Serial revealing the weirdo Black Ops 2 books he's reading.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, that's
All right.
Liam Wilson from North Carolina. Congratulations, Liam. We'll ship you out something real nice. And again, remember, everybody else, hashtag GI Show Challenge. Take a picture of those phones.
That's
Subscribe to the
Get your
podcast.
Zune out.
How many can you get in one picture? And it can be a mix, doesn't it? Like it can be 7 iPhones and 1 Zune. That Zune's still worth 2. This is going to be a
Are
mathematical
you
nightmare.
really giving Zunes 2 points?
Hell yes, Zune's 2 points.
Go to a bar if you really want it. Go to a bar. Wait until everyone's really drunk. Until you'll buy a round of shots if everyone in the bar does it.
Better yet, just steal everybody in the bar's phone,
Yes.
subscribe for them, and then slip it back into their
Wait,
pocket.
yeah, wait until everyone's
yeah.
passed out at the bar, which I'm sure happens at bars all the time.
Every bar.
And then just steal everybody's phone and just have one big photo of all of their phones, and then just give it. And then you'll obviously remember which phone was what, and
Right.
there won't be any mix-ups when you.
And then you can
return
It'll all
Skype in
turn
t-
out
and talk
fine.
all
Is
about
it.
basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then everything will be fine.
And if it's not, blame Serial. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
he gave you the idea.
He
I am
can
in no
take
way
it.
accountable, so who cares?
Oh, all right, guys. Thanks for sticking with us, and stay tuned now to get intelligent, get smart. Let's learn about RPGs. Let's learn about what the last couple years at BioWare have been like. So stay tuned for an interview with Mike Laidlaw. Mike Laidlaw, welcome to the Game Informer Show, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you. I think everyone's wondering, what is your life like these days? You have a wonderful set behind you with hats and a green screen. Is this just Mike's life from here on out?
Yeah, it's okay. So I mean, the hats and green screen are all Twitch accessories these days. I decided one of the things I really wanted to do was dig into it. I've been doing it, God, maybe 2 years now. And it's really fun to just kind of use it as an excuse to play games and stuff. And I've got this little tradition on Saturday nights. I will grab something small from like an indie studio and like stream their stuff for like 2 hours that I've never played before. So it means I'm kind of at least getting through the backlog of shame in terms of I've launched the games in my giant Steam pile. But yeah, what I'm up to, I would say more formally is I've been kind of trying my hat at consulting. And so there's been cool opportunities to work with other studios. And one of the big things I wanted to do is just take the advantage to shake up that I'm not at the same place for, a decade plus, and see what other kind of methodologies are out there, what other teams are doing, and that kind of stuff. Obviously, I can't talk about what I've been consulting on, but for thus far, I've worked with 4 different groups, and it's been a blast.
Yeah, I mean, without getting specifics of the games you're actually consulting on, like, what's the big takeaway? How eye-opening has it been? What have been some of the biggest shocks of like, oh, this is how other studios work? I was so inside this bubble, I had no idea.
I honestly, nothing shocked me. Nothing's been like, wow, I had no idea it would be like this. What's been interesting is how much common kind of methodology and approach has evolved almost in parallel. So if I'm at a big studio, I tend to see a lot of things are very, very familiar to stuff we talked about at EA or stuff we talked about at BioWare, but it will have different names. It will have a slightly different cast on it. But there's also a bunch of stuff like Scrum methodology or Kanban that are kind of more, development directory production stuff that has been adopted almost across the industry. So you kind of get a really interesting sense of how it's like, it's like from Spanish to Galician to Portuguese, and how they're all clearly in the same family, but they are kind of steps along a path, and that they've evolved in some degree of parallel. It's really been quite cool to see. Yeah.
Are you focusing mainly on narrative then, or are you just overall, hey, here's tips on just overall directing a game as well?
I would say it's been a mix. It depends on what the studio needs. For the most part, I've been definitely there's been a heavy narrative component, because I think that's where there isn't necessarily the same level of expertise of storyteller, but who has been in like kind of large team management. And that's, I think, kind of the special thing they're looking for is they like, if I'm working with say it's a mobile studio, they know exactly how to build really compelling mobile games, but they may not know how to get story into them, but still have it be very gameplay centric. So that's the stuff that's been a lot of the questions, and that's been pretty cool.
How long were you at BioWare? What year did you start?
2003. So I started when Jade Empire was spinning back up after Neverwinter Nights completed. So 14 years.
So when you're doing this consulting, are you, no offense, Mike, but are you working predominantly with younger developers in general? Like, do they want stories of the olden days of what it was like in the mid-aughts at BioWare?
Okay. So it's funny. I do. I would not say I'm working with super young teams. There's been one group that's been fairly junior, but what you'll have is the range, right? So the people that often it's people I know across the industry I've worked with, they were formerly at EA or some other role, who are the ones bringing me in, but there's always junior members of any team. And yeah, there is a little bit of like, tell us, Uncle Mike, tell us what it was like in the before times.
So it's the story of the shepherd. Yeah.
Yeah. The big ones that resonate are when I talk about, so I used to write for the Adrenaline Vault, which was like a website that did game reviews way back. And it was one that was like, I think a lot of its traffic was driven by having like just a massive patch library, but I used to review them. And, in 2001, I got to watch the bottom fall of the internet because no one would ever actually make any money from advertisements or internet at all. And kind of watching that evolve over the years has been highly entertaining to me. So
does it feel like you're going full circle and going back to that era? Like talking about these games, playing them on Twitch, do you feel like, oh, I'm almost reviewing games again?
Like a little bit. It's so different though, because, back then was very much the get the game in the mail, write about it for like a week or two and then get, 1,500 words or 2,000 words up, but just like paragraph form, proper, scoring by style and stuff. Yeah. These days it's more figure it out as I go, play it live, interact with audience, right? All that stuff is completely different, but it has a bit of the same feel, but at the same time, it's funny when you have like a Twitch community that develops their own internal jokes. Like if I can name a character, they're getting named Kevin because of a RimWorld character who actually survived a hellish campaign, but finally made it back to space with a prosthetic arm as he so deeply desired.
Is it satisfying to feel like the stress is just flowing out of your body at this point. It's just night and day compared to just being in the grind of a studio like BioWare.
Well, here's the thing. BioWare was not typically a grind in that, like, there was this kind of crushing mandate or anything like that. There was certainly very much the day to day, and that's the big change. Is now there's a lot more kind of shorter but fresh challenge. And I think the thing that I found is really different is my job with Dragon Age was for, say, the better part of a decade to care about one thing exceptionally deeply. And with consulting, your job is to dive into something new, acclimate, and you need to care, because you can't. I don't think you can make any kind of creative product without that level of passion. But you can't and don't need to maintain that for like year-long horizons. You need to be thinking that far out, but it's not necessarily on you to execute across that period of time. And it creates a very different kind of approach where my job is to try and say, well, in my experience, this kind of thing will be dangerous if you don't anticipate these problems, or if you aren't looking at this kind of scope or having a crumple plan for your development.
Hang on, stop. I got to get a definition. Crumple plan?
Sorry, crumple plan is a term I used to use with the team where what if we hit a brick wall? What do we do to survive that? As in the same way that a car is built with specific zones that are like, if this collapses, it won't harm the passengers. So they build crumple zones into their plans. And so with the team, I would often like sit down with the writers or like the level designers and say, okay, if we had to cut like a quarter of this because of some sort of timeline thing or a staffing problem where we couldn't get expertise or the programmers couldn't optimize conversations or something, what would we do? Right? What would you do if things got disastrous? And then that's where you say, well, what if we hit a wall? How would we crumple in such a way that we survive?
So then, okay, I'm very interested in the nitty gritty of this whole thing. So then do you have just like a Google Doc somewhere with like, okay, we have the plan for, if D scenario happens, let's go ahead, pull the parachute, let's go to D scenario, because we've worked out every hypothetical. But then at the same time, if you're going around early in a project to each department and saying, okay, what if your life was just lit on fire? What would you do? How does that not freak everybody out?
Well, I think what I've found is that a dev who's fairly junior will tend to get really weirded out by that. A dev who's fairly senior will get weirded out by that not being discussed. Interesting. Right? Because things go wrong. I've often joked that the fine art of video games, even more so than movies, is that we need to spin an entire reality and systems by which that reality interacts using the gossamer thread of nothing, right? We don't get an actor who looks a certain way, acts a certain way, and is attended to school. We get a voice actor, but like their appearance, their character, we may be face scanning, but we still have to do all of that work. There's all that kind of extra stuff. I used to joke that, in movies, this is free, right? Just cloth moving is a free thing for them. But for us, weirdly, flying is free, right? Make a character just go up in the air and ignore gravity. That's super free. So it's like a different skill set.
Yeah.
But more veteran devs know that something will always go wrong. And if you build your plan and build your content kind of so that you are right up to the line where it's like, well, we have 100 people and we have 10 days, so we have 1,000 staff days, so we're just going to get this done. That assumes no one ever gets sick, no one has a personal crisis, no one ever has a bad day, right. Like that everything is optimal and there's never a power outage. And over the years, you learn that something will always go wrong. So the end of Jade Empire, for instance, our entire building got shut down because there was a flood in the basement that destroyed the transformer that powered everything for the building we just moved into.
Oh my God.
And the IT team, and I remember Mark Dara was lead programmer at Jade at the time, and he was instrumental in this. We basically took all the most important people, airlifted them to the hotel next door, rented a ballroom, and ran 1,000 extension cords, and then sent everyone else home because the rest of the building was basically out for 2 weeks. And that's in the hardcore cert submission. This is going to Microsoft for finaling. Like we had to get it moving. So you have to anticipate that, but you lose days of work times hundreds of people. That's a year gone with each day. If you have 300 people on your staff,
right.
You have to anticipate that. So you walk around and you basically say, if things did go wrong, what would we do? And I think in a lot of ways, it's a question you have to ask yourself to say, assuming something will go wrong, we don't know what. have we built a thing that could withstand a change, right? And if you end up with a story or a set of levels that like this whole game doesn't make sense unless 100% of this is here, then you've built a very brittle structure, and that's the thing that will not survive contact with reality, as I put it. So we tend to look for having flex, having room, and then having a plan to crumple if need be.
Yeah. So I mean, having to shift over to the hotel, was that the biggest disaster or the biggest crumple you had to deal with throughout your years?
I would say there was a secondary one that was it was mitigated, thankfully, but there was a team meeting where I'm trying to remember. I think it was either early days Inquisition or late DA2. I think it was late DA2, and we were doing like a sprint planning. So all the leads, the whole leadership group would go. And again, we rented a ballroom because we had a meeting room that was big enough, but it was nice because you could go up and get buffet. And it was kind of like an all day event where you were planning, what hundreds of people would be doing for months. And I guess someone sneezed on the ham because like 35 of us got norovirus, like the full on, like hold a bucket so you can puke while you're sitting on the can kind of norovirus. And I remember so clearly our lead programmer, Jacques Lebrun, going, "Hey guys, do you feel a little off? I feel kind of sick. Like I'm getting the flu." And I'm like, "No, I feel fine." And then 3 hours later, I'm sitting there with a glass of red wine going, I don't feel so good either. And then I was off wine for about a year as a direct result of how terrible that was. But so that happened and like sidelined us to a serious degree. I think actually it might have been DA2 DLC or something. Anyway, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we were also like nearing the end of working on like Mass Effect 2. So that whole team was like, "Oh God, no Dragon Age people are allowed on the floor." Like they went into this kind of soft quarantine to make sure that they didn't all come down with norovirus because it is pretty contagious.
Yeah,
not airborne, but anything droplet related. So yeah, that was we got leveled, and that was an unpleasant series of events. Let me tell you.
Jeez. So
Yeah.
I mean, you talked about how you want to see what else is out there, see what the rest of the industry is up to and whatnot. But that is. That's the main reason you left? I mean, we hear reports of like, oh, Dragon Age, it's moving into the future in some vague sense, and it's maybe been rebooted recently or gone through some changes. Was that a result of you leaving, or were the changes made and then it's like, I'm going to go ahead and head out?
Yeah, it's probably, I mean, to some degree, a creative director leaving is always going to result in changes, right?
Yeah.
Because someone's going to have to take those reins, and typically people have different visions for games. So you hear those reports, I wouldn't be surprised. What did happen is that there was kind of a scenario where like, we were working on something related to DA,
right.
and there was kind of a confluence of events where a bunch of people were moving on to Anthem, which is again pretty common and pretty standard operational procedure. Because when you're working on a game of that size, you tend to want to do it. I mean, people from Andromeda moved to help us for Inquisition and so on. So it ended up in a place where there was kind of like, how did I even describe it? It's like a production lull, where like there's a moment where it's kind of calm and it's not super pressing and there's not like 100 people looking to you for direction and guidance. And I was at the point where, I joke that 14 years is like the 7-year itch times 2, right? Your second round of it, like the foot fungus coming back or something. And it was a point where like, I was kind of, I'd been talking to Mark about like, I'm not sure this might be my last one. I kind of feel like I want to do some other stuff. The Twitch thing, I wouldn't say it's like taking off in that I have 1 billion followers, but it's like, I kind of wanted to explore that.
Interesting.
I was thinking about consulting. So it was at a point where I was able to do it without being highly disruptive to my team.
Yeah.
Right. I was able to move on where they could, still, comfortably have jobs and clear tasks ahead of them and that kind of stuff. And to me, that's pretty important because I always looked at my team as being like, my job is to make not just the designers, but the whole team, like the whole Dragon Age group feel like they're a functioning family unit. And of course, if you just remove yourself from that when things are fairly tense, that's highly disruptive and frankly unfair. So when I had been thinking about it for a while, I spotted a lull. You put all those together, I'm like, I think this is the time. And it was scary and hard. And I super burst into tears while I was giving my goodbye speech because it was really emotional and a whole bunch of people came. There was a lot of hugs, let's put it that way. And then my team kind of threw me awake. They they went down to the bar and they started just busting out liquor, and we had a really good chat, and I told a lot of war stories. It was a lot of fun. And more of the happy ones, like less the yay, we blew up the transformer. We didn't, but more like, hey, this one time this person came up to me at PAX and gave me a giant hug because they felt they've been represented in the game for the first time, and that kind of stuff. That's like feel good, because if I could leave them with anything, it'd be an understanding that the work we did mattered, and it was important that we kept doing it.
Yeah, I mean, how does it feel to? You can only do so much as you're walking out the door of you're setting up the Tetris pieces, but it's still on the top of the screen and saying like, all right, I love you. I love the team. I think things are looking okay. And now I just have to separate myself. Has that been a tougher transition than you expected to kind of stop thinking about Dragon Age?
I think, if we get to the point where another one gets announced, that's going to be like a rough day. It's going to feel super weird. Like I won't be upset. But it'll feel strange.
It's complicated.
Right? Why isn't that me? I remember, I went on a giant weight loss kick last year, and I dropped about 80 pounds. And a big part of my motivation was like, let's go on stage and announce Dragon Age, being all slick and stuff. And thankfully, I've not suddenly put all the weight back on. Thankfully. I was actually worried about that. I'm like, oh wait, without this visualized goal. But for the most part, here's the thing. There's a really, really competent team of people that know, not like, I don't want to say that the direction it was headed, because that implies that it can only go one way. Dragon Age was always conceived to be a world that was run like a really good DM's campaign, at least we hope, a really good DM's campaign of like D&D and stuff, where there were plot threads waiting to be unraveled, and we had loosely a 2+ game plan, like where could it go from here?
Yeah.
Is that coherent? Is that sane? Yes, it is. Okay. And the team's at the point where like someone like Patrick Weeks, being a super veteran and possibly one of the best writers I've ever met. And I worked with like Drew and Dave, like other exceptional people, but like Patrick had a really good knack of tying it to gameplay and stuff too. And Daniel Kading, who he was with Relic for like over a decade, and then came to join us as lead design. Like the guy's absolutely brilliant. Like there are some incredibly talented designers who have been with the franchise more than long enough to have the DNA kind of right in their veins. And I think what they're going to do will probably be different than what I would necessarily do, but it'll be really interesting and really cool. So I that helps me sleep at night.
Yeah, and you must have had a bizarre, unique perspective there, because Casey Hudson, creative director for Mass Effect, left, but then returned to BioWare. So in theory, as you're heading out the door, did you pull him aside and be like, hey, what does it feel like to walk out the doors of BioWare, Mr. Hudson?
There was a moment where we had a good long talk, and he said, "No, I get it. I was exactly where you are right now in terms of needing a change and wanting to do something different. So I totally understand." And it was good. He was super understanding about it. And Mark was a little more like, "Don't go, dude." But like Mark got it too. We'd worked together since the beginning.
Yeah, he's the executive producer of Dragon Age, right?
Yes, executive producer of Dragon Age. Sorry, and he was lead programmer on Jade Empire, so I knew him from way back.
Yeah.
Funny aside, apparently one of our first interactions, I complained that all the coffees that he and our producer at the time had gotten for the team were all like double cream, double sugar. And I'm like, dude, this is way too sweet. And he was like, how dare you turn up your nose at the free coffee we went and got you. And in retrospect, yeah, I was being a bit of a snot, but it was a tense time. He's never forgiven me, for the record. We worked together successfully for like 12 years, but he's never forgiven me for that moment. Still brings it up.
Bodily based conversation that I was expecting for the inner workings of BioWare. It's mostly about food and puking and pooping. Okay, got it.
I know. Just too much sugar in that coffee. Yeah. So anyway, it was a really good chat, and I did joke to the team. There was a moment where I said, "Hey, you never know. Maybe I'll head out, go work for Microsoft for 5 years, then come back and be in charge of the whole studio. Who knows?" But it's not outside the realm of possibility, right?
Yeah.
It has happened, but yeah, no, it was cool. Casey was really good about it, and I think he kind of gave me these long, slow nods and went, "Yep, get it, understand."
Yeah, for sure. Can you share any insight into what that was like for the studio when Casey Hudson came back?
I think it was like, it was very much a surprise. No one knew he was coming back. So it was sort of like a team meeting where, Aaron announced he was heading out, and then Casey just sort of came around the corner. And,
oh, wow.
Bioware does not have a huge turnover, so a very, very significant portion of the studio had worked either directly with him or adjacent to his team. So we all instantly knew who he was. And it was like, well, I know my reaction was very much like, well, if you had to pick someone who at least understands the workings and the culture and stuff like that, it's a pretty good call. And Casey generally was well respected around the teams. He was exceptionally good at articulating like a vision with clarity. And that, I think, for like a studio lead is an exceptionally good talent to have. And what I found is that coming back from Microsoft, I wouldn't say he was different, but he certainly had like kind of a broader perspective around kind of leadership, and having worked in a company that was even larger. He remained intrigued by some of the stuff he'd worked on. I know he was still quite interested in some of like the AR, VR stuff. He was following it quite closely.
Yeah.
Not that he was going to push it, but that he talked about it with a level of I guess, intimacy that you would expect. But at the same time, it's really cool to hear someone kind of who went deep into something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting transition to say that he had focus and leadership, and I mean that comes to the Mass Effect series and everything else that he worked on. But then the idea of, in his shoes, like broadening it out to entire studio, like how do we focus
Right.
an entire studio? I guess it helps if the studio is so focused on Anthem,
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the two teams had different cultures, and there were times there were like up to 5 teams, but for the most part, if you say like the DA team and the Mass team, they had different DNA and they had slightly different approaches to things. But in terms of like, we're trying to tell a story, it's going to be kind of third-person action adventure. We're going to have characters you care about. Like all of that was fairly well shared, and most of the teams would kind of fluidly move between whatever project was coming up to be the big one. So it wasn't like there was a massive drift. The leadership philosophy, I would say, was similar, while the approaches were different, right? Which I think most teams were more than comfortable with. And you found leads groups that had worked together for a fair amount of time and were able to kind of swiftly and quickly articulate to, find solutions rather than just keep, talking around problems over and over. Both teams were very good at that. So
Yeah. Well, you're giving a GDC speech coming up very soon. Have you been in a reflective mood trying to put that together? What has that been like?
It's been really interesting. Because I'm trying to find kind of anecdotes and lessons learned from kind of 14 years. Jokingly calling it empires to ages, right? Because that's the flow. But it is for the Narrative Summit specifically. They asked me to come talk, so I am putting more of a writerly cast on it. And what I'm really enjoying is I'm starting with stuff that's like, when I was a junior, I learned a valuable lesson, and working up to as a creative director, kind of at the other end of the writing spectrum.
Yeah.
There were other things. So it kind of, starts with a little more tactical and a little more like, hey, you might be a junior yourself. Here's some tips I use. Here's how I got through writer's block and that kind of stuff. And then working forward to when I was managing a team, or when I had to represent the team, like the writing team or that kind of stuff. Here were some things I did to help people who maybe, had a different focus, understand the priorities and the needs and so on. So it's deeply introspective. I will say it's not a bad mix when you're thinking about kind of, consulting, and it's like, well, I'm trying to take these life lessons and bring them forward to other teams. So how do I articulate them? So I'm finding it to be a very good exercise.
Yeah. Do you have
I also, it's worth noting, I recently joined the a Q&A panel called It's Not in the Writer's Manual. That's at like 12:30 on the Tuesday.
Okay.
And that's with a group of other writers at varying levels who are going to talk to more like junior writers or aspiring writers. So pretty excited to be involved in that too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, do you have a thesis from your 14 years? Like, I don't want to spoil your punchline, Mike, but if there's something at the end where it's like, overall, this is the biggest lesson, this is my North Star. Do you have any go-to point there?
I think so. I think probably for me, the two biggest things that where I enjoyed the most success is when I had and articulated a clear vision and put the effort into going through the very painful process of tumbling the rock of an idea into the gemstone of something that's actually like an articulable vision that a team can kind of get behind. And that's not something you can ever do by yourself. You have to do it with your fellow leads. You have to do it usually with the team that's starting. And then the transparency side of it is recognizing and respecting that the team you work with are exceptionally smart. They're very talented. They could work anywhere in the industry. And they need to know that the decisions you're making are for good reason and that you've done your due diligence in making them, right? So you aren't just randomly changing your mind. You didn't just play Horizon Zero Dawn and now it's all robot dinosaurs, right? Like you need to have a reason for why you're doing it, and that the more transparent you can be and the more open and honest you can be with your team, the better they will respond to change and uncertainty, because they will trust that you will keep them in the loop and keep them aware of what's happening.
Does that just mean more team meetings? Does that mean having bullet points that are posted on the wall? What does that mean?
Every communication strategy you could possibly employ. I don't think I've ever had a manager feedback where people were like, Mike's communicating way too much about what's happening with my career. That's never, ever happened. And I think that for me, it's overall, we had a team value on Dragon Age that basically was that we would speak with candor but without rancor, right? Not the big rancor, but like that we wouldn't be full of heat or hate or anything, but that we would be candid in our feedback. And a big part of that as well was taking our notes from, again, Mark, who was the EP, and Mark led the Dragon Age team in a very matter-of-fact way. To the point where you almost were afraid to ask him questions because he'd tell you the answer, and sometimes you weren't ready for the answer. But still, there was a level of respect that he commanded, and that I think the Leeds team took from him and from AQ to say, we don't need to dance around tough issues. And over the years, I got better and better at being direct with my team and occasionally saying, yes, this does suck, but you know what? We have a strategy for dealing with it. We've thought about it. Here's what we're going to be doing. And if any of you want to talk about it, my room is right over there. Grab me. We'll break out. We'll do a session and we'll go get coffee, whatever you need. And I find that the more consistent and the more open you are about that, the more they'll believe you and the more that a team will come to trust that there is good decisions being made. Because you're showing your math.
Right, exactly. I mean, where does the temptation or the urge to tap dance around issues come from? Is it just, it'd be uncomfortable, or is it just, hey, it's backfired a number of times where we've been open and honest, and then somebody on the team says, F that, this is effed?
I think both of those, natural human kind of aversion to conflict, right? Some people like really get off on conflict, and I find they tend to be very bad team players because they make it, right? They generate conflict, or they deliberately say antagonistic things. I'm an only child, so I have a lot of like, oh God, I can't upset people kind of weird hangups that I'm mostly through nowadays. I try to be functional for an only child. But and I'm Canadian, so like it's surprising I wouldn't say shit if I had some in my mouth, right? But for the most part, I think it's a learned skill to be able to figure out how to deploy bad news in a way that isn't hopeless, right? In a way that gives people a real understanding that they're like, this will be okay, even though it seems bad. Let's talk about what we do next and that kind of stuff. Like having that level of anticipation and a level of understanding and empathy for the team can be very hard, especially when things are going a little sideways or you've had a sudden change, because you're processing it yourself, right? You're dealing with it and you're trying to get the level of fortitude. So, it all comes, I think, through a lot of time and experience and just being willing to say, yeah, this is terrible, but it's okay. Let's talk about what we'll do next. And that, for me, was the methodology that got me through any kind of weird stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, leaving a place like BioWare, it's a good opportunity, I think, just to brainstorm and think, what if a studio the scale of a BioWare just stopped conveyor belts of production and just said, what is the most efficient way to deliver something satisfying to our fans? Do you think about that, of like, what groove are we in that it's tough to get out of? I think we do this at Game Informer. Maybe we should do it more, but just that idea of like, we've just been on this conveyor belt for so long, but if we just had to stop everything, is there a better means of going about it? I'm curious what you think about a studio the scale of BioWare. Like, is it just, okay, what if we separated into 5 teams and just made smaller RPGs, less scope, and just crank that out? Like, do you ever just brainstorm like that?
Yeah, I think there's a real value to asking yourself questions that almost sound silly at the beginning. Like, what would a 3-hour RPG look like?
Totally.
A satisfying RPG experience that basically got rid of all the, no grinding, no nothing. So it's still choices and it's still got stats. But how does that work? And I don't have an answer for that one.
I think the answer is Undertale, by the way.
Pardon me?
I think the answer is Undertale.
Yeah, actually, that's very true. I'm filled with determination. Ultimately, I think that asking those questions are incredibly valuable, and I think you do need to pause. And I think for us, we would use between projects because, again, when you had sort of Group A ramping up and then Group B would tend to go small and go back to like a nucleus. And those were the times when you could make changes. And that doesn't tend to like revolutionize a studio, but it does have incremental gains. We saw an entire methodology for evaluating like player content by player experience, which is to say it was like the writing, the levels, the everything like that, sort of like Valve's Orange Box methodology, where they would like take things to a certain point. We developed a whole a flow for that over the course of the Mass Effects, which Dragon Age then adopted because it was proven to be very successful. We had some excellent, feedback from the team, and we said, great, why don't we kind of do that same kind of lockstep, phase gating with approvals process that they're doing, and we adopted it and brought it into our own. So it wasn't, again, a revolution, but it was an evolution of that kind of, production maturity that was very, very cool. So you do tend to see that on a smaller scale where each studio kind of, as the team ramps down, they have a moment to be introspective. And we were pretty aggressive about postmortems and getting the team together and, letting people sometimes vent, but also like, but what would you do to fix it is a very important question, because often the team has incredible insight.
Yeah. It's such a weird time too, just thinking about each release is going to be realistically spaced out further and further apart. Mass Effect Andromeda took a long time. Dragon Age Inquisition took a long time, although I think the first Dragon Age took a long time as well. But I mean, what do you do to combat that? Do you just say, hey, fans, sit tight for 5 years. We'll be back in a bit?
Well, I mean, it works for Bethesda.
It's true.
I think, especially in the RPG space, people are more than happy to wait if they feel that the quality of the product is directly impacted by a delay. And I have increasingly moved to the belief that as an industry, we are no longer really competing for money. I think we're competing for time.
Totally.
Right? There are so many games. There's almost let's call it a critical mass of games that are currently people's constant rotation. And so now if you release like a big AAA, especially if it's not like an extended, actually it doesn't matter. If you release any game, you are now asking people not only to buy your game, but to make the conscious decision to stop playing their regular, whether it's League or Overwatch or PUBG or whatever, any of those games. You're basically saying, hey, can we shoulder our way into your day? Because I my kind of like go-to kind of filler game right now is Final Fantasy 14, because they have a very compelling progression loop. They let you level up every class, so there's always something I can do in Final Fantasy 14. I'll run Ravenaster this week and then should do my dailies and all that stuff. For other people, it's PUBG or their League scores, or they're working on Overwatch because there's loot boxes in this week's event.
Yeah.
You name it. You're asking people to say, hey, put that on pause or prioritize us for a little while ahead of that, or potentially move something aside to make room for our new game, which again, sometimes you get a PUBG and that happens. So the money obviously matters, but building something of quality and of, I don't know, I think of it as like there's a word of mouth component where people are like, no, you need to play Witcher 3. Everybody needs to play Witcher 3. That causes that kind of exponential jump and growth. And I don't think you get that unless you're carefully considered and you're building something of quality.
Yeah. Can you wrap your mind around somebody like, is it Larian Studios? I mean, Divinity Original Sin and 2 just last year, which, has had a huge amount of success. Do you look at that and it's just like, how the hell are those guys able to crank that out? Or what are your thoughts on that production?
Well, okay, so I look at Divinity, and I've always believed that like a true sequel, like this is a similar engine, these are relatively well-known tool sets, these are relatively well-known rules, we have a setting, like all of that stuff. True sequels, as opposed to like, this isn't me bitching, but like Inquisition was like a jump to a new engine, right? So it's not a sequel in the same way. That there's a force multiplier in having a veteran team who knows the world, they know the stuff, they know how to build it, and they know what they're doing. And now they get to kind of run a little more wild with their ideas, or they know how to generate content very quickly. So I look at Original Sin 2 as being an absolutely brilliant move on their part. They had a massive tech investment to make the turn-based combat, the verticality, the interactions between the elements, lighting blood on fire is amazing. I'm going to explode that acid, all that stuff, right? Like they took that, they doubled down on it, they smoothed out some of the tougher kind of challenges. And then they were like, let's go really hardcore into multiplayer. Let's add in the tool set. Like they made additive and incremental improvements along the lines of, I guess, their core audience. And I think what happens when you do that is that if you had initial success, which Original Sin 1 absolutely did, that all the people who had been saying to their friends, hey man, you need to play Original Sin, often their friends don't listen to that. But when the second one comes out and then your buddy's like, no, the sequel's even better, it's like, okay, fine, right? There's kind of this mind share that the public goes into that, I think Witcher 3 did the exact same thing, where everyone was like, Witcher 2 is really good. And then 3 comes out and now you're like, I'm not behind the curve. I can jump in. They're telling me it's friendly. Holy shit, that looks pretty. You name it. And suddenly I think that's where your sequel explosion comes from. And I think I don't know the exact sales numbers, but I feel like, that's a 1.5 times whatever you sold of the one before.
Yeah,
right?
definitely. Now, if you listen carefully, Mike, you can hear thousands of people listening or watching this screaming, Dragon Age 2, explain it. Why is that a different scenario?
So Dragon Age 2 was an exceptionally aggressive production cycle. There's no other way to describe it. We followed up a 6-year-long dev cycle with a 16-month-ish dev cycle.
Yeah.
That's very hard. That's an exceptionally hard thing to do. And frankly, I absolutely recognize that there are problems with Dragon Age 2. There are parts of the game that are weak, that are significantly weaker than Origins. People get very angry if I don't preface things with that. He just thinks it's great. No,
right.
I am well aware Templars just falling from the sky is not ideal. It's Raining Men videos aside, because they are funny, but essentially it was an exceptionally challenging switchover. There was a change to the art style. And you put all that together and you end up with a scenario where we had to tell an exceptionally different kind of story. We had to reuse a lot more assets. We had to make some very, very hard choices to make that happen. That was not me giving the direction that we'll do this in 16 months, but it was essentially a need of the studio that I cannot really discuss.
Yeah.
And we did it. And the fact that we pulled that off at the level we did, I think is pretty spectacular. But that doesn't mean that it is immune from criticism.
So it wasn't a late game crumple. It was, hey, from the starting gate, this is what we have to do. Let's do it.
It was. We opened by driving the car into the wall, and then said, okay, what do we do with this crash test dummy? But no, there were a lot of things like the decision to say, let's set it in kind of one location, but we'll move it forward across time, for instance, was me desperately looking for a game that had pulled that kind of thing off. And there were two paths that I could see that were possible. One was the Majora's Mask, like we're going to create a looping story, but that felt Dragon Age was lower magic than that, so we felt that wasn't appropriate. So the other inspiration for that was going to Eternal Darkness, the GameCube game, if you remember it, where Eternal Darkness regularly reused locations, but they did so through different times. So you were in like the Mayan, I think it was Mayan or was it Aztec? One of them. Anyway, temple. And you were the priestess, and it was all lit up, and it was clean and gold. And then later, you were the archaeologist, and it was cobweb filled and dark and spooky. But it was the same geometry, the same textures, but a different lighting, different treatment, and so on. They did that many, many times. They used the church multiple times. They used the mansion, all kinds of different ways for retraversal, little Metroidvania, and in doing so. I thought that they'd done a very good job using what I saw as a limited palette of assets. And I said, that might be a way forward. Yeah. What if we told a story that took place over time? And again, it was something new that fantasy hadn't really done in the gaming space, where time would jump forward and you'd see characters evolve. And like usual, the Dragon Age team always over-delivers in terms of their character evolutions and the characterization. And, some of our gameplay stuff suffered, right? And it wasn't, I don't think it was atrocious, but it definitely was not the best possible follow-up we could have done to Origins. Right. And I recognize that. But, I will never not be proud of the work Luke and Cheryl, two of our writers, did with Aveline and Isabella, and how their relationship evolved over those 3 time periods. It was just exceptional, right? And Varric and the Hawk family and its remarkable tragedy, and you name it.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff in there.
Yeah.
Do you feel the pressure to keep up with all RPGs because people just see you as, oh, you're the RPG guy. Surely you've played everything that's ever been released.
I mean, there's a pressure. I'm not sure I succeed at keeping up with that pressure. I've been, playing through Divinity, finally getting into the Witcher DLCs. But yeah, they are, the thing with RPGs is trying to keep up with all of them is that it's borderline impossible just due to the volume of time needed. But they are there are some absolutely stellar games out there right now. And it's interesting as well because when living in my indie space, it's interesting to find stuff that's more like your indie RPGs. The one I've been geeking out on is done by two brothers, the Treese brothers, I think they're called, and they made a game called Star Traders Frontiers, and it's maybe 500 meg. It is top down, or no, done. It's not. It's kind of a top down space sim, like if Elite Dangerous had remarkably detailed politics with like trade alliances and factions, and you could gain like bounty hunting marks and trade permits and ranks with factions across 12 different navies, evolving storylines and eras. Occasionally you pull into port and there's like terrorists, and it's up to you to decide if you want to like leap to the defense of the port, help the terrorists, and that again determines your factions or reputations.
Oh, wow.
And I'm playing this badass trader right now with a crew of like 36 people, all of whom I'm named and customized, and they all have their own skill sets. It's deep. It's a titch impenetrable, but they are making the UI better, and they patch the thing every 4 days. And that's very much like a space sim RPG, almost like Privateer. And like, okay, that's out there, and it's astonishing, and I love it. And I'm going to keep playing it because it's baller. But you need to try. It's this interesting mix for me where I need to play the AAAs. I need to get the RPG adjacent stuff, right? Like Horizon, right? And
Sure.
you could say Assassin's Creed Origins. Need to get to those and get through those. I played a big chunk of Horizon, but not Assassin's Creed at all. Like, it's overwhelming. So you have to kind of pick your battles. Often if someone pings me about contracting and there's something kind of like more, if they're like, we're more in action adventure, then I would start digging into those. And even in the course of a week, you can get a really good sense of what the game is like. You may not know the spoilers for the story endings, but you can get a good sense of like, okay, what does Horizon let me do? What
Right,
can I do
right.
in Origins? How are they building into stats and that kind of stuff? So you can learn stuff pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, hey, like removing Bioware from the equation to make it easier
Sure.
for you. What do you think is like the best RPG of the last 10 years? Is there one that stands out?
Best RPG of the past 10 years. Whew, that's tough. Let me go back. I'm going to come down and just say that. Oh man, that's tough. You know what? I'm going to say Skyrim. And I'll tell you why I'm going to
Okay.
say Skyrim.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obvious contenders, Witcher, huge, right? Obviously, I think the Divinities are stellar. Like they are amazing games, but they're like the old school. But I think for me, when I look at Skyrim, it was, I think it achieved on 2 to 3. I don't know. We'll see. Any number of different vectors. So the first thing it did is it took a world like Morrowind was weird and amazing, and then Oblivion was very generic but more approachable, right? It had
Yeah.
a smoother UI. It was a lot easier to dive into, but it was also a little bit forgettable. Like, and Lord love me, I love that game, but it was, welcome to our stone castles
Right.
and gates of demons, right? You're
Yes.
like, okay, that's cool. But with Skyrim, what they did is they said, okay, cool, all of that, but what if you were a badass dragon killing Viking? And you're like, okay, that's a fantasy that I can latch onto, and that gives me more impulse and more presence in the world as a character. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, cool, I am the Dragonborn. That's way more significant than I'm helping Martin, right? So I think that it I wouldn't say, it's not like a narrative triumph in that it like blew my mind or anything, but it definitely took a formula and took it to a next level. The fact that they support and continue to support modding tools, and that the players are able to put it through the point where it's like, here's the latest best Skyrim patches is still being put out, right?
Totally.
Is astonishing. And the breadth and depth of activities, the fact that they thunk you down in the very middle of a giant map, and that, there are whole parts of that game I still haven't seen 130 hours in, right, is to me astonishing.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like when we're looking on the horizon of 10 years, I think that it, in a lot of ways, refined open world, set a new bar that I think Witcher, was able to follow through, and then went much more narratively heavy with that fixed character. But it also, they did a level of mod support, a level of community support, and a level of passion that I think not many games have ever achieved. But again, I consider it to be slightly first in a very, very tight heat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Witcher. I mean, have you had much interaction with CD Projekt Red? Do you ever reach out to those guys?
On and off. Like it's not like we're grabbing coffee because Poland's a long way away. But when I see them at cons and stuff, I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, loved your game. It was absolutely fantastic. And they reply with the same thing. And I mean, CD Projekt Red like licensed the Aurora engine, which was the Neverwinter Nights engine, to do Witcher 1. Right? A lot of people forget that. They're like, well, you guys must hate each other because fantasy. And it's like, no, man. No, I get to play that game and I don't know how it turns out. That sounds awesome. I think, and you look at it and you're like, well, those games are competing, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, Witcher's far better and everything's amazing. I'm like, sure, unless you want a party, right? Unless you want like a lot of the things that made Dragon Age really stand out and unique, I think, were things that Witcher didn't particularly dig into. They had notable characters, but they didn't do that party experience or the banter, all that stuff. So they make very different games. And we had to lean more into like tabula rasa characters, like you could be a Canary or an elf or a male or a female. Like all these characters are different. Whereas they had the advantages and disadvantages of you get to be Geralt and kind of like dig into his history and his relationships and so on. So like I love that it is a different game, but it's also like there's elements of it that are similar, elements that are different. And I think that's just to, frankly, the industry's benefit. Like if we all made the same game, it would kind of suck. I think we need a Divinity. We need a Witcher. We need a Skyrim. Like we need all of those because, again, we're fighting for time. People don't have time to play it all. So let's give them a breadth of experience and see what resonates with each segment of the audience.
Yeah, definitely. So, CD Projekt Red just called tomorrow and offered you a job on Cyberpunk. You wouldn't take it, is that right? You're hell bent on consulting for a while.
Okay, so I'm really digging the consulting, but if there's a few things that would certainly they would raise an eyebrow. They would absolutely raise an eyebrow. There was okay, so I am a giant cyberpunk nerd. Like straight up, Neuromancer is my favorite novel of all time.
Oh wow!
Straight
okay.
up. Yeah, like I am. William Gibson could like write on the stall of a bathroom, and I would make a small pilgrimage there. Like he is a brilliant author, and like the idea of kind of the Case and Molly kind of heist thing is just that was seared in 12-year-old me's mind, and Cyberpunk would certainly pull me in. Right, I'm watching Altered Carbon. I'm looking forward to Mute. That's another one in that space. So Netflix seems to be leaning there as well. But for the most part. Like, moving to Poland and moving my family and that kind of stuff would all be exceptionally challenging. But it's still like Cyberpunk's always had a draw. It's always had a draw. And I think, again, it's interesting that they're going to that particular Cyberpunk is like an R. Telsorian. Like it wasn't even an A-lister kind of like pen and paper, but it was a very cohesive world that was very it was very well thought up, if not like it didn't have like the kind of hook in the same way Shadowrun did, but it did have its own corporations, it had its own stuff. And I think it was very true to that Gibson-esque kind of style where it was like, yeah, no, this is pretty much corporate dystopia. Enjoy. So yeah, I'm wildly looking forward to seeing what they come up with at E3. Let me tell you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can wrap up here. I'm just curious. You have more insight into the inner workings of BioWare than most people on planet Earth, I'd say.
Sure.
Are there comments that drive you insane? Do you read? I mean, just absorbing the internet. I think there are, obviously, you've seen fans out there. The FEA crowd is loud and dominant. And there's also some fans who are like, I'm a little bit worried about Anthem now. A little bit worried about Anthem. Do you have a message for those fans or anything you'd like to communicate to people that are in that camp?
I don't know. I mean, Anthem's its own beast, but I think that the team on it are exceptionally talented, and a number of the people that were working with me are over there helping out as well. Like and I've talked to folks who've played it in the studio, and they're like, no, man, it's getting like sincerely fun and very cool. So I'm very hopeful for it, and I think that. If BioWare ends up in a space where they do crack the biggest chestnut, which will be getting kind of their more reactive storytelling style into something that's a bit more cooperative, I think that's going to be awesome, right? And again, you look at Divinity Original Sin 2, which I think like 1 had it, but I think 2 really leaned hard into the co-op storytelling, and there was some exceptional work there. So I would not say it's impossible by any stretch of the imagination. So in terms of like, should people be worried? I think it's a game, and it's something you should always, dig into and look for. But personally, I'm not sitting here going, oh man, I think, Mark has moved over and has taken over the helm, and I would follow that man into the sun. So that's always a good sign. And in terms of like things that drive me crazy, it's not about Anthem. It's usually, so, if you'd asked me after DA2, I probably would have just started crying because, there were a lot of more personal attacks. And I think, certainly those suck. Yeah. No one person is ever responsible for all decisions. But I think the ones that drive me a little bit crazy are devs are lazy. This is just clearly clearly they're too lazy to do this. And it's like, oh man, I have never met a game developer who stayed in the industry for any length of time who was lazy. They were under considerable duress. They were challenged. They worked against impossible odds with often recalcitrant technology. But lazy is the exact opposite. 9 times out of 10, if something comes out, the dev team knows it isn't good way before and feels it way more deeply than anyone critiquing it. And if it does catch you offside, again, any dev I know worth their salt will go, well, let's not make that mistake again. We clearly need a new metric or a new way of evaluating whether this stuff is going to be emotionally satisfying or, whatever the problem was, right? You always inspect and adapt. Like I had members of our production team go through Inquisition and competition reviews and detail like where they were landing and what was being brought up across like 47 different categories in order to get a general sense of not just where the game was landing, but also where the industry was prioritizing their focus and stuff. Like to what degree does choice and consequence come up? And like it tracked enormously powerfully across everything we looked at, right? So it was something that we're like, good, we need to make sure that our internal metrics are also paying attention to that. So,
Right.
Anyway, devs, not lazy. Usually incredibly hardworking and probably a little stressed.
Yeah.
So take it easy on them. They're all good people.
That's a good message. Good message. Well, hey, Mike, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to the GDC talk. So if you're going to GDC, definitely swing by, check it out, and I don't know, bring signs that spell out Laidlaw or something, and hold it up in the crowd. I don't know what you really want. I don't know what your best case scenario for giving a GDC speech is.
I think stunned silence with one person wiping away a tear at the end would be my ideal.
That's perfect. All right, thanks again, man.
All right, thank you.
And thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Game Informer Show podcast. Be sure to tune in next Thursday. We'll have another new episode waiting for you. Bye, everybody.